Chapter 1120. Dami Hayashi pressed down on Bu Fong's shoulder, and the two of them left the palace and stood outside. The wind blew. The vermilion robe on Bu Fong's body returned to its normal state, changing back to its red and white appearance. The flaming wings on his back also gradually dispersed. Dami Hayashi let go of her hand, looking at Bu Fong with a strange expression. "Man, your name is Bu Fong, right?" Dami Hayashi asked. Bu Fong nodded. If it was possible, Bu Fong hoped that these women would call him by his name. Bu Fong felt that it was a little strange that they kept calling him man, man, man. "Very well. Then I will still call you man in the future." Dami Hayashi grinned, revealing her white teeth. Bu Fong, "All right, I won't joke with you anymore. Since you have agreed to the Queen's request, then do your best to fulfill it. However, I can only tell you to act according to your capabilities," Dami Hayashi said. As she spoke, she walked out of the palace. Bu Fong furrowed his brows and followed. As the top restaurant in Goddess City, Spring Breeze Pavilion covers many businesses. Not only is it good food, but it also has singing and dancing performances. It is a place where many officials of the imperial court relax and entertain themselves. It is precisely because of this place that the dishes of Spring Breeze Pavilion cannot be underestimated. There is naturally a reason why it can attract so many customers. The two of them walked out of the palace area in a short while arriving in front of the Dragon Lake. Dami Hayashi told Bu Fong some things about Spring Breeze Pavilion. Naturally, Bu Fong kept nodding his head. From Dami Hayashi's words, Bu Fong also understood that this restaurant, Spring Breeze Pavilion, was not ordinary. After all, there were many restaurants in Goddess City, and Spring Breeze Pavilion was able to stand out from the rest and become the most popular restaurant in Goddess City. Naturally, it was extraordinary. Moreover, the chef of the restaurant was capable of cooking for the Queen's imperial feast. "I'm planning to hold a banquet for my men at Spring Breeze Pavilion tonight to celebrate. Ahem, do you want to come have a look? Don't blame me for not helping you." Dami Hayashi put her hands on her hips and laughed heartily at Bu Fong. Bu Fong couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Bu Fong clearly heard what Dami Hayashi said to her subordinates. Wasn't it just a feast to celebrate his capture? Bu Fong didn't want to go to this kind of banquet. It felt weird. "Forget it. You don't look like you want to go. I'll take you to your place now." Dami Hayashi shrugged her shoulders. "Also, I want to give you a friendly reminder. As the only man in Goddess City, you should pay attention to your identity. Don't go out if you don't have anything to do. Be careful of being targeted by some women with bad intentions. I heard that men are..." Dami Hayashi's eyes swept over Bu Fong with a strange gaze. His gaze was filled with deep meaning. Looking at her, Bu Fong was dumbfounded. What the hell? However, Dami Hayashi didn't say much. Shortly, she brought Bu Fong out of the square, entering the bustling city. Bringing Bu Fong, they turned left and right, and in the middle of the crowded city, they found an ordinary inn. "I don't have much money. You can stay here for the time being. Don't worry. Goddess City's security is pretty good. As long as you don't run around, nothing bad will happen," Dami Hayashi said with a smile. "All right. Although Her Highness gave you a chance, she gave you a deadline. Goddess City's Goddess Day will be held in 7 days. So if you want to cook the Imperial Feast for Her Highness, you'd better get the qualification within 3 days. That's because the standard for the Imperial Feast requires 4 days to prepare. Oh, by the way, if you get the qualification to cook the Imperial Feast, but if your Imperial Feast doesn't suit Her Highness' taste," Dami Hayashi looked at Bu Fong with a strange gaze. Until Bu Fong's scalp went numb, she raised her hand, making a slight movement on her neck. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a bright smile. Laughing loudly, she swaggered out of the inn. Bu Fong stood where he was, speechless as he watched Dami Hayashi leave. "Get the qualification within 3 days? Looks like I have to hurry." Bu Fong rubbed his chin, lost in thought. Then he began to study the inn. At that moment, Bu Fong's face darkened. On the counter of the inn, an Ani was glaring at Bu Fong. Her eyes were sharp. What the F***CK? A man. After staring at Bu Fong for a long time, the Ani finally opened her mouth. Her voice was like a thunderclap, startling Bu Fong. The Ani wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth and said, "Man, are you a room? The best room costs 100 nether crystals." Nether crystals? Bu Fong was bewildered. Then, he turned to look at the black jade talisman that Dami Hayashi handed him. His mind sank into it, and he immediately sensed the value displayed on it. 500. 500 nether crystals. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. As a general, that woman was quite unreliable. How could she be so shabby? Bu Fong shook his head and didn't choose to stay in the inn. Not to mention that the inn's environment didn't make him feel comfortable. Just looking at the Ani's sharp eyes, Bu Fong didn't dare to stay in the inn. Of course, Bu Fong didn't have time to stay. If he wanted to rest, he could enter the heaven and earth farmland, which was more comfortable than any inn. 500 nether crystals. Nether crystals should be the common currency of the netherworld. Bu Fong played with the jade talisman, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He walked out of the inn, and in the next moment his body suddenly stiffened. That was because he discovered that the surrounding pairs of eyes had landed on him. Whether they were little girls, teenage girls, or young women, those strange gazes made Bu Fong's hair stand on end, as if they were looking at a monster. Bu Fong quickened his pace. Even though he was as calm as an ancient well, he didn't dare to stay here. This goddess city is full of women. Then how are these women going to reproduce? Such a thought suddenly popped up in Bu Fong's mind. Heaven and earth had yin and yang, and yin and yang were divided into two extremes. Men and women had different attributes. One was yin, and the other was yang. Only with men and women could they reproduce. They were all women. How could they reproduce? Bu Fong could not figure out, even if he wanted to. So he stopped guessing. This goddess city was extremely grand and bustling. Bu Fong was now thinking about how to get the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. Bu Fong wore a black robe, which covered his appearance. This way, the scorching gazes from the surroundings lessen a lot. 500 nether crystals. I wonder if it's enough for a meal in the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Bu Fong thought for a moment, then squeezed the jade talisman in his hand and strode forward. The Spring Breeze Pavilion was the biggest restaurant in Goddess City. It was a very luxurious, towering building. The building was like a fong, sharper and sharper as it reached the top. On the way to the Spring Breeze Pavilion, Bu Fong saw all kinds of things in Goddess City. Although this city was filled with women, it was still bustling with activity. In front of the Spring Breeze Pavilion, there were female guards guarding the door. They looked very serious. It didn't look like a place to eat at all. Bu Fong stood in a corner, observing the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Suddenly, Bu Fong froze, because he saw a large group of people crowding in front and behind. Among them, Dami Hayashi smiled like a fool. This group of women came to the front of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Dami Hayashi greeted a beautiful woman who came out of the Spring Breeze Pavilion, then entered with her men. Some people entered the Spring Breeze Pavilion, and naturally, some people came out of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. A strong smell of alcohol wafted out from it. Many drunk women walked out from it, swaying left and right. After a while, a giant red dragon flapped its wings and landed in front of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Those guards moved instantly. The beautiful woman who greeted Dami Hayashi ran out. A beautiful woman in a scarlet robe gracefully walked down from the Crimson Dragon. Although she wasn't as beautiful as the queen, she was still beautiful. That woman's identity seemed to be very noble. The beautiful woman escorted her into the pavilion. The guards also dispersed. Bu Fong exhaled. It turned out that the guards were here to welcome the woman riding the red dragon. Roar! The red dragon was much more violent than the green dragon. It stopped in front of the Spring Breeze Pavilion, and many people didn't dare to approach it. A terrifying aura diffused from the red dragon's body. Its dragon scales reflected a metallic luster, which were incomparably sharp. The red dragon exhaled hot air from its nostrils. Then it lay on the ground, wagging its tail. Its eyes shrank. Not a bad ingredient. Bu Fong looked at the Crimson Dragon and murmured. This red dragon wasn't bad at all. Although it wasn't as good as the Torch Dragon he had seen and the Yinglong he had seen in the Heaven Chief realm, It wasn't as good either. However, Bufong knew that this red dragon had a lot of true dragon blood. It can become a dish in the imperial feast. Bufong was so happy. After that, he clasped his hands behind his back, wrapped in a black robe, and slowly walked away. He walked toward the gate of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. The red dragon was very violent. Its head was pressed against the ground, and its nostrils fumed hot air, almost melting the ground. All of a sudden, the red dragon's eyes locked on Bufong, who was wrapped in a black robe. Someone dared to swagger in front of her. The red dragon slightly parted its mouth. Flames seemed to be escaping from it, its dragon eyes gazing at Bufong. Just as Bufong walked past her, the red dragon was enraged. With a rumble, it got up from the ground. Its head moved forward, opening its mouth at Bufong as if it was about to roar. Bufong paused. Many people around took in a breath of cold air. They looked at Bufong as if they were looking at a dead man. There were so many ways to go. Why did this man have to walk in front of the red dragon? Everybody in the city knew that the red dragon of the great General Chi Si had a bad temper. The red dragon flapped its wings, stirring up gusts of wind. Bufong furrowed his brows. He indifferently cocked his head, glancing at the red dragon. In his spirit sea, the gold divine dragon let out a deafening dragon roar, its voice soaring to the sky. Bufong stared at the red dragon, his pupils seeming to have the gold divine dragon twisting inside. A formless dragon's might immediately spread out, golden light burst out. The red dragon was about to roar, but it got stuck in its mouth. Struck by Bufong's dragon's might, it lay on the ground, not daring to move. It didn't even dare to flick its tail. The red dragon looked at Bufong with awe and admiration. What? Bufong was a little surprised. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. The dragons in Goddess City were all female. He had used the gold divine dragon's might to suppress them, but the gold divine dragon seemed to be a F** king male. Letting out a sigh, he nodded to the red dragon with a serious expression. Then Bufong clasped his hands behind his back. His face didn't blush, and his heart didn't jump as he walked toward the Spring Breeze Pavilion. The person in charge of the Spring Breeze Pavilion had long been dumbfounded. Which expert was this? With just a glance, he actually made Lady Chi Si's red dragon not dare to be presumptuous instantly. The guards even forgot to ask about Bufong's identity. When they came back to their senses, Bufong had already disappeared through the door. Everyone was shocked to see the red dragon lying on the ground, sticking out its tongue and licking its claws. That obedient red dragon. Was it still Lady Chi Si's terrifying red dragon? That black-robed man just now. Who was he? In front of the city gate, a series of knocks rang out. In the quiet night, it was so clear. The two female guards were stunned. They looked at each other in confusion. It was so late at night, and someone was knocking on the city gate. Creak. The two of them opened the city gate, leaving a gap. Boom. The two of them jumped down from the high wall. With a loud crash, they landed on the ground, stirring up dust. Holding their spears, they looked straight at the gap. There, a swaying figure walked with enchanting cat-like steps, striding over. Huh? The two guards were instantly stunned. When the light shone down, they could see the person's face clearly. That person's face was covered with white powder, which was so thick that it looked like it was about to fall off. She had a thick blush on her face, and those big red lips made the two guards shudder. A head full of curly hair spread out. Her waist was swaying, and her chest was piled high. Her long skirt wrapped around her legs, showing her figure. It was quite rough. Two officials, this little girl has walked for a long time, and finally found the city. The woman squeezed her handkerchief, her voice dry and hoarse. The two guards were dumbfounded. It's so late at night. Why are you dressed up like a ghost? The guard frowned, swinging his spear, blocking in front of the woman. What do you mean, neither human nor ghost? This is this queen, this woman's meticulous disguise. If you don't know how to appreciate it, please shut up. The woman instantly widened her eyes. With such a glare, the powder on her face fell a few times. The two guards looked at her with goosebumps all over their bodies. No. This woman is definitely strange. Come with us. You're bullying a good girl. This isn't right. The woman instantly became anxious. Suddenly, a wave of nether energy erupted from the woman's body. Her figure instantly disappeared. He pointed 2 fingers at the foreheads of the 2 guards. The 2 guards instantly went limp and fell to the ground. After dealing with the guards, the woman heaved a sigh of relief. She kicked away her embroidered shoes, revealing her big feet, which stepped on the ground. With a ripping sound, her long skirt was torn, revealing her hairy thighs. This female dress really doesn't suit I. Only that exhibitionist from the Heaven Chief realm is suitable for this kind of dress. Fortunately, I entered Goddess City. Let's first find young Bufong. Young Bufong, please don't be beheaded by that woman by Lu. Holding the torn skirt, Hades-era hurriedly strode toward the city. Outside the door, the white-haired Tai held an eyebrow pencil, rustling in the wind. Chapter 1121. Sir, your dish is here. This cooking method is made by crushing the dragon liver, pressing it under high pressure, and then grilling it with a high-temperature flame. The control of the fire is not bad, but the dish is too rough, with too many flaws. Well, please wait a moment, sir. The dragon liver was soft and tender, and it was fried just right. After cutting it with a knife, one could still see the tender color of the liver. The waiter curled his lips. Yes, his lips were indeed wrinkled. He had to admit that the service of this spring breeze pavilion was really thoughtful. Sir, this is the menu. Please take a look and tell me what you want to eat. It's not on the menu. Now, only the dishes were left. He was simply pretending to be fat. Seeing that Bufong had finally ordered, the waiter's eyes lit up, and he looked in the direction Bufong was pointing. Goddess City was the same as the outside world, full of competition and social classes. However, when he looked at the menu, Bufong found something strange. Since he didn't have enough nether crystals, Bufong didn't care about the price. He first looked at the varieties of the dishes. If he could use nether crystals here, he could make a lot of them. The waiter chuckled. Then, with a flip of his hand, he slapped the knife on the table. The waiter's face grew darker, and he turned to look at Bufong. Bufong had ordered only one dish, and he didn't order any wine. Is this a Western dish? Bufong couldn't help but furrow his brows and look at it suspiciously. There were many barbecue dishes on the menu, and of course, there were other dishes as well. The fork made a sharp noise as it struck the knife. It was the jade dragon liver, which was worth 500 nether crystals. The sound of the knife clattering kept ringing. The next moment, the knife spun in his hand and was finally held tightly by Bufong. Then, he nodded solemnly. The waiter was no longer as enthusiastic as before, and his smile faded a lot. A beautiful voice resounded in his ears. This voice became more and more pleasant to listen to, as though it had materialized into musical notes that lingered in his ears, causing the waves in his spirit's sea to subside involuntarily. The waiter stood in the distance. When he saw that Bufong actually took out his own knife and fork, his face revealed a slightly surprised expression. Then, he curled his lips and looked at Bufong with disdain. The waiter said with a smile. His smile was very kind and amiable. He didn't show any contempt because of Bufong's previous question. Although he was dressed in a black robe and attracted the attention of many women, most people did not take Bufong seriously. Bufong stood on the spot, frowning slightly. He lifted his head and looked upstairs. The moment he stepped inside, he saw that the walls were made of a jade-like material. It was extremely warm and emitted a sparkling brilliance. Would you like to order this dish? This is our Spring Breeze Pavilion's famous dish. It's one of the chef's best dishes. After the knife and fork touched. Sir, you must be joking, right? Each floor was a wide, circular area, with a spiral staircase in the middle. The steps of the staircase were made of obsidian, a type of stone that looked as smooth as water. A loud sound rang out, and the dining table shook. Emerald dragon liver? Bufong furrowed his brows. Placed on the table, it emitted a sparkling brilliance. There was a dazzling lineup of dishes on the menu, densely packed. Whether it was the decoration or the service, Bufong was very satisfied with everything. If the dishes were not delicious, this spring breeze pavilion could only rely on the service and decoration to scare people. In the end, it wouldn't last long. The waiter had never seen such a shabby appearance. Of course, the decoration of Spring Breeze Pavilion was even more luxurious than that of a high-end restaurant on Earth. "I want to see your Spring Breeze Pavilion, chef. Is that okay?" In the mouth, there was a kind of warm texture. After biting, the dragon liver's meat spread out like sand, filling the mouth. The chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion was so busy and noble. How could he come to see such an unknown person? "Shut up. Did your boss teach you to casually interrupt a customer during a meal?" It was obvious that the waiter who served Bufong was a waiter. She was wearing clothes that vividly showed off her figure. Her face was slightly powdered, and she was quite beautiful. Basically, the number of dishes was 4 digits. "It's time for the star of our Spring Breeze Pavilion to appear. It's really a kind of happiness and enjoyment to hear her singing." The waiter raised his head, looking toward the upper floor. A melodious voice rang in his ears. The voice was very pleasant. Bufong took a deep breath. Facing the waiter's doubt, Bufong nodded without blushing. The waiter smiled and didn't answer. Then, he led Bufong to the second floor. At this moment, Bufong was seriously looking at the menu. Bufong flipped through the menu in confusion, but he couldn't find that dish. Suddenly, Bufong's hand shook. "Hello, are you here for a meal?" Lord Liu also looked at Bufong in disbelief. The style of the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion gave people a noble and tranquil atmosphere. "The best dish is the signature dish," Bufong said. Dipping in the sauce, Bufong put the piece of dragon liver into his mouth. Just as Bufong was thinking, these instruments from another world were different. The quality of the sound seemed to be warming the ears. "Then hurry up. I'm already very hungry." In an instant, the atmosphere became stagnant. Bufong knew that the waiter was looking down on him, but he didn't care. Bufong slightly opened his eyes. In the distance, the waiter had already walked over. He wasn't the owner of Spring Breeze Pavilion, but the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion. Suddenly, the sound of high heels hitting the ground interrupted Bufong's thoughts. Bufong looked at the waiter's figure, who was about to leave. Finally, he found a seat on the second floor. Because the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion was the soul of Spring Breeze Pavilion. As long as the chef was there, he could cook delicious dishes that could impress Her Majesty the Queen. There was music and delicious food. A look of envy appeared on his face. At this moment, the waiter who guided Bufong was smiling at a woman next to her. "Lord Liu, please wait a moment. This guest will be done soon. I'll talk to her. Today, Spring Breeze Pavilion's business is too good. It's not easy to find a seat." A gentle voice rang in Bufong's ears. Bufong still ate the jade dragon liver obediently. There were corridors around each floor on which there were tables. Many people were sitting at the tables, shaking their wine glasses and closing their eyes to enjoy the rare tranquility. But now, this unknown person had appeared and was looking for a chef. It was a restaurant that left Bufong in a trance. The waiter helped Bufong pull out a chair and took out a piece of white cloth from his spatial accessory. Indeed, although the decoration was splendid, it wasn't the kind of splendor of palace. Instead, it gave Bufong the feeling of a high-end Western restaurant on Earth. Vermilion fruit wine dragon steak, who had the highest status in Spring Breeze Pavilion. Bufong glanced at the name of the first dish, making a sound of surprise. This high-end Western restaurant style made Bufong a little dazed. Bufong was very calm. Of course, he had no other choice. The people around him were slightly bewildered. Many people turned to look at him. On every floor, there were young women singing. With a glance, the waiter's face froze. That was the status of Spring Breeze Pavilion. However, he could only use nether crystals. Forget it. The fork stabbed into the dragon liver, and the knife slightly cut down, cutting off a piece of dragon liver. A clear sound rang out. It was a round plate which was made of a jade-like material, engraved with pale golden patterns. Bufong raised his hand, gently tapping on the table. "It's really nice." However, with a glance, Bufong's face froze. The waiter left. Before leaving, He gave Bu Fong a disdainful look. The noble spring breeze pavilion did have its own uniqueness. Sir, please sit down. It wasn't that the dragon liver didn't taste good. In fact, the taste of this dish was passable. His face became much more solemn. The knife and fork gently touched each other. Bu Fong raised his hand, stroking the white cloth. Immediately, he felt the material of the white cloth. The fragrance of the dragon liver spread completely, covering his tongue and taste buds. Not only the singing, but there were also many musical instruments accompanying it. This dish could only be regarded as barely edible. The woman called Madame Lu glanced at the dish on Bu Fong's table. Her red lips curled into a disdainful smile. Thus, Bu Fong had to prepare it himself. The main food tasting would start from the second floor. The waiter didn't prepare any utensils for him. However, before she could finish, she was coldly interrupted by Bu Fong. Sir, you can only have a chance to taste the roasted bi-winged dragon on the highest floor of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Moreover, the chef only cooks it once a month. This dish is Her Majesty's favorite, and it's the finale dish of every imperial feast. The waiter was very proud, explaining to Bu Fong. After tasting it, Bu Fong made a judgment in his heart. After dilly-dallying for so long, he actually ordered the cheapest dish on the menu. Even if the waiter had undergone formal training, he couldn't help but show a trace of disdain. Sir, the white cloth shook, spreading on the table. The waiter's eyes widened. Bu Fong stuffed a piece of dragon liver into his mouth, glancing at the waiter. This restaurant seemed to be able to wash people's souls. All right, give me this dish, Wang Yao said. Suddenly, that woman obviously didn't expect that Bu Fong would actually ask such a question. After all, those who could enter the Spring Breeze Pavilion were all people with status. Even if they weren't noble officials, they were wealthy merchants in the city. This made Bu Fong couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Although you can't eat the chef's cooking on the second floor, the chef's apprentices can show the original taste and taste of this dish, the waiter said with a smile. In the past, Bu Fong had cooked papillion steak. Tasting papillion steak required a knife and fork, so Bu Fong had tools. Bu Fong calmed the doubts in his heart, nodding. Suddenly, he thought that he had returned to a high-end restaurant on Earth. Two figures seemed to be standing on the side of his table. Buzz, however, the price behind it made Bu Fong's heart jump. Then, a knife and fork appeared in his hands. An imperial feast dish? Bu Fong ate. The more Bu Fong looked, the stranger his face became. Bu Fong wasn't unfamiliar with dragon liver. After all, he used to have a dish called dragon liver popsicle. However, that dish needed fruit vinegar to show its deliciousness. Many people's eyes also swept over. No chopsticks, no knife and fork. This was Bu Fong's final evaluation. The taste filled his mouth. A melodious song suddenly rang out, going along the spiral staircase, lingering in everyone's ears. It made their hearts calm down, and they couldn't help but stop to watch. Although it was the cheapest dish, Bu Fong was still somewhat looking forward to it. Sometimes, a single dish could allow one to learn many things from it, especially for a chef. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes and muttered. That waiter's body trembled. Then he snorted and left. Bu Fong stepped into the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Jade Dragon Liver. The sound of footsteps arose again. At first glance, he knew these women had undergone professional training. Although they were singing songs that Bu Fong had never heard before, their beautiful voices were very suitable for eating at this time. It was the first time he had seen such a restaurant. Whether it was the Hidden Dragon Continent or the Heaven Chief Realm, Bu Fong had never seen a restaurant with such a strong style. The Spring Breeze Pavilion was hollow, leaving only a spiral staircase. At each level, there was a small path leading to a different level. As soon as the dragon liver entered his mouth, Bu Fong furrowed his brows. On the plate was a square dragon liver, which was covered with a thick broth. The broth was a little thick, which made the dish radiate brilliance. She carried the dish to Bu Fong, placed it down, then turned around and left. It was Bu Fong's order. The hall on the first floor of the Spring Breeze Pavilion was very spacious, but there was no dining table. You can say that, but the chef's signature dish should be the roasted bi-winged dragon. The cooking method was exquisite, but the chef didn't put his heart into it. Bufong had been watching quietly, and he didn't mention the matter of finding a chef to the waiter. Then Bufong stopped, retracted his eyes, and looked at the dish in front of him. Bufong thought for a moment, then asked the waiter. The waiter smiled. This made Bufong, who only had 500 nether crystals, feel a little embarrassed. However, he wasn't in a hurry. He continued to hold the knife and fork, cutting the dragon liver, and put it into his mouth. Lord Lu said the railing was made of a revolving type, and it went all the way up. So Bufong picked up the menu. Chapter 11:22. Bufong's action attracted the gazes of many people in the surroundings. With such a big commotion, it was hard not to attract people's attention. The waitress was also startled. She never thought that Bufong would dare to make trouble. Someone dared to make trouble in Spring Breeze Pavilion? Who the hell did he think he was? Spring Breeze Pavilion was a restaurant specially cooked for the Empress. It was the host of the Imperial Feast every year, and no one in Goddess City dared to make trouble there. This poor guy who ordered a dish that cost only 500 nether crystals actually dared to slam the table. The waitress's face quickly turned ugly. She stared at Bufong, but because Bufong was wrapped in a black robe, she couldn't see his face clearly. Therefore, she didn't know what expression Bufong had on his face at this moment. Lord Lu, I made a fool of myself in front of you. This lowly one will ask the guards to take this reckless guy out. The waitress didn't care about Bufong. Instead, she said to Lord Lu, who had an ugly expression. Lord Lu nodded his head. This was the first time she saw someone daring to make trouble in Spring Breeze Pavilion. Spring Breeze Pavilion's background wasn't ordinary. It was definitely extraordinary for it to be able to stand in Goddess City for so long. The right to host the Imperial Feast was the dream of many restaurants. However, after so many years, no restaurant had won the right to host the Imperial Feast from Spring Breeze Pavilion. Although Lord Lu was an official of Goddess City, she didn't dare to offend Spring Breeze Pavilion. Therefore, she just sneered and glanced at Bufong. Reckless fool, I don't know who gave you the guts to do this. Lord Lu snorted. She wasn't worried about Bufong's back at all. What kind of background could someone who came to Spring Breeze Pavilion and only ordered a dish that cost 500 nether crystals have? The cheapest dish in Spring Breeze Pavilion was the Emerald Dragon Liver, which cost 500 nether crystals. It should be known that basically no one was willing to eat this dish. Lord Lu had never seen anyone eat this Emerald Dragon Liver. Hurry up and finish it. I'm in a hurry to eat. I'm very hungry, Lord Lu said impatiently. The waiter smiled apologetically for a while. Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth. He was ignored. However, the waiter's behavior had indeed aroused his displeasure. What's wrong with ordering the cheapest dishes? Those who came were guests, and since they were guests, they had to treat them the way they should be treated. The way the waiter looked down on him made Bufong very unhappy. Most importantly, he had only eaten half of his food, and the waiter actually asked him to leave. This was what angered Bufong the most. In the distance, there was a commotion. The guards in charge of guarding the Spring Breeze Pavilion rushed over. A clanging sound rang out. It was the sound of a long sword being unsheathed. Bufong had seen these guards before. They were the guards who had respectfully welcomed the woman riding the red dragon. He didn't expect these people to move so quickly. That's her. She's causing trouble in Spring Breeze Pavilion. As soon as the guards arrived, the waiter hurriedly pointed at Bufong, shouting. Many people around looked at Bufong with sympathy. Causing trouble in Spring Breeze Pavilion would probably result in a tragic end. However, no one stood up for Bufong, even though they knew that the waiter was in the wrong. These guards wore armor, and their bodies were tall and sturdy. Their aura was also very strong. However, Bufong was very calm. Although these guards were strong, the strongest one was only a 1-star true Immortal Realm expert. Bufong was currently a 3-star true Immortal Realm expert. He wasn't afraid of a 1-star true Immortal Realm expert. Because of the vermilion robe, these people couldn't see through Bufong's cultivation. The clanging sound rang out as the guards approached Bufong. On the tall building, many people were attracted by the commotion, craning their heads to look. Bufong's hand shook. A meatball fell out of his hand. He used 2 fingers to catch it. When it came to causing trouble, Bufong, was never afraid of anyone. However, just as the conflict was about to erupt, a shout suddenly rang out. Bufong was bewildered. The guards were bewildered. The surrounding people were also slightly bewildered. Bufong raised his head, looking at the 7th floor. There, Dami Hayashi was lazily leaning on the railing, waving at Bufong. Bufong, didn't I tell you to come to Spring Breeze Pavilion to find this general? What are you doing down there? The corners of Dami Hayashi's mouth slightly rose, revealing a playful smile. Hearing those words, everyone froze for a moment. Then, an uproar broke out. Who didn't know Dami Hayashi in Goddess City? She was the general of the Empress Green Dragon Army. Her status was noble, and she was also a frequent guest of Spring Breeze Pavilion. That black-cloaked person actually knew General Dami Hayashi. It seemed everyone's gaze changed. Originally, they were looking at Bufong with a sneer. Now, everyone knew that the situation had been reversed. A waitress actually dared to offend a general's guest. Just now, the waitress's attitude was seen by everyone. No one would defend her. Around them, many people chuckled. Lord Lu's face slightly paled. Although she was an official of Goddess City, compared to Dami Hayashi, she was simply an ant. I didn't expect you to be General Lin's friend. Please continue to eat. You can take as long as you want. I can wait. Lord Lu's face instantly became flattering. Regardless of the relationship between Bufong and Dami Hayashi, in public, she didn't dare to continue to deal with Bufong. In Goddess City, Dami Hayashi was famous for being protective. Every time she brought her subordinates to Spring Breeze Pavilion to eat and drink, it was obvious. It's all because of you, you lowly servant. What a snob. Lord Lu turned around and scolded. Then, he slapped the waitress, causing her face to be dumbfounded. Then, Lord Lu smiled at Bufong, turned around, and left. The waitress was already dumbfounded. What happened to the pauper? What happened to the ant? A pauper who spent 500 crystals to eat a dish actually knew General Dami Hayashi? The waitress quickly understood what she had done. If the higher-ups of Spring Breeze Pavilion knew about her attitude, they would definitely break her legs. Bufong clasped one hand, retracting his gaze from Dami Hayashi's playful smile. Then, he looked at the waitress. "Get out of my way," Bufong said indifferently, his voice carrying a hint of sternness. The waitress, who was lying limply on the ground, kowtowing to Bufong to apologize, trembled. "If that woman didn't stop you, you wouldn't be able to bear the consequences," Bufong said calmly. In the next instant, the bursting meatball between his 2 fingers was instantly raised by Bufong, gently biting into it. Sizzle, a gust of hot air spurted out. A rich fragrance instantly filled the air. Everyone around let out a soft cry of surprise, as though they were shocked by the fragrance. Suddenly, everyone's eyes shrank. Even Dami Hayashi, who was leaning on the 7th floor, couldn't help but stiffen, because they realized that Bufong had thrown out the meatball that he had taken a bite of. The golden meatball seemed to have turned into a shooting star, suddenly shooting out, hovering in the middle of Spring Breeze Pavilion. "Explode." Bufong spat out a word. As soon as this word came out, everyone was bewildered. A moment later, their bodies seemed to be shrouded in a cold aura. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. The bursting meatball that had flown to the middle suddenly shot out thousands of light beams. A wave of terrifying fluctuations was released, spreading in all directions. It caused the ground to crack and then explode. It was like a gorgeous firework, bursting forth in everyone's eyes. The fluctuation spread. The wind howled, and the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion seemed to be shaking violently. The waitress was stunned. The guards were dumbfounded. Lord Lu was so scared that his face turned pale. On the 7th floor, the playful smile on Dami Hayashi's face also froze. That explosion, it was extremely terrifying. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Just now, they were facing a meatball like that. The guards' backs were already soaked in cold sweat. Everyone was glaring at the waitress. That kind of existence, How could it be a poor ghost? If that kind of existence wanted to cause trouble, with a few more meatballs, the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion would be torn down. The guard were scared. If the Spring Breeze Pavilion was really torn down, their heads would probably fall off. All of this was caused by that snobbish waitress. I. The waitress was scared out of her wits. Bufong was too lazy to look at her. Of course, she had to pay the price for looking down on others. After all, once she made a mistake, she would naturally have to bear the consequences. Bufong clasped his hands, his black robe fluttering. The sound of rustling echoed in the quiet Spring Breeze Pavilion. Bufong took a step, his body instantly soaring up. There seemed to be an invisible staircase under his feet as he walked forward step by step. He walked toward the 7th floor. That kind of imposing manner was like a mountain pressing down on everyone's hearts. In many people's eyes, Bufong's cultivation was not too high, but that imposing manner was so strong that it made many people's hearts palpitate. Even Dami Hayashi was a little absent-minded at this moment. Looking at Bufong, who was stepping on the air step by step, she felt as if she was looking at a peerless expert with peerless talent. That kind of pressure almost made her breathless. Soon, Bufong landed on the 7th floor. Dami Hayashi was still staring at Bufong. "I heard that you're going to treat us." "I'm coming," Bufong said. "Treat?" Dami Hayashi came back to her senses, the corner of her mouth twitching. This man was really shameless. She just saw that Bufong was embarrassed, so she just wanted to help him out. This guy was actually hitting her with a stick. "I don't have money recently." Dami Hayashi twitched her mouth. This floor seemed to have been booked by Dami Hayashi, and the people around were all Dami Hayashi soldiers. Bufong wasn't angry at all. Slowly, he took off his black cloak, revealing his head. As soon as Bufong's face appeared, the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion instantly burst into an uproar. The clamor resounded endlessly. "A man! It's actually a man. I heard that Her Majesty just met a man today. Is it him? How many years has it been since a man appeared in our goddess city?" The surrounding customers were all excited. One by one, they stuck their heads out from the railings, looking at Bufong on the 7th floor. Dami Hayashi was instantly bewildered. "You're crazy. Or do you really enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention?" Dami Hayashi stared at Bufong, frowning as she scolded him. Bufong's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. He sat down in front of Dami Hayashi. Flipping over a porcelain cup, he raised the wine jar. Swish! The dark green wine flowed out of the wine jar, filling the entire cup. The rich aroma of the wine spread. Down below, the guards took the dazed waiter away. The singing started again. However, Bufong could feel that the owners of those songs seemed to have their eyes on him. Bufong was very calm. He was already used to being the center of attention. He gently took a sip of the wine. As soon as the wine aroma entered his mouth, Bufong's brows slightly twitched. "This wine is not bad," Bufong said lightly. "Of course it's not bad. This is the most expensive wine in Spring Breeze Pavilion. One jar costs 9,000 nether crystals. That mouthful you just took is equivalent to the jade dragon liver you ate." Dami Hayashi rolled her eyes. Since it had already happened, Dami Hayashi didn't want to dwell on it any longer. Sitting in front of Bufong, she poured herself a cup of wine. Then, she poured it in her throat. The hot and spicy taste of the wine flowed down her throat, making Dami Hayashi frown and blush appear on her face. "Good wine. Nice. Good wine. Not really." Bufong swirled the wine in his cup, took a sip, and glanced at Dami Hayashi, who looked like a drunkard. Dami Hayashi's movement of pouring wine paused. Then, her sharp eyes fell on Bufong. "Don't think that you can talk big just because you're a man. This wine was personally brewed by the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion. How can it not be considered good wine?" Dami Hayashi's voice was a little cold. Bufong gave Dami Hayashi a strange look. "The chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion brewed it himself? Are you sure?" Bufong asked. "It's absolutely true. I, Dami Hayashi, grew up drinking the chef's wine," Dami Hayashi said, patting her voluptuous chest. "Well, poor woman, you've really been deceived since you were a child. If this wine is really brewed by the chef. If this is the chef's skill, this so-called imperial feast should be nothing more than this. Bufang said expressionlessly. The next moment, he poured the wine into his mouth. His hand shook. The jade jar containing the acheron of helplessness appeared in his hand. He opened the lid of the jar, and a surge of wine fragrance rushed out like a gust of wind. Chapter 11:23. As soon as the wine aroma wafted out, the whole place fell into silence, especially Dami Hayashi, who was sitting across from Bufang. Her beautiful eyes widened as if she had seen something incredible. Her nose twitched as she sniffed the wine aroma in the air, and the redness on her face deepened. It smells so good. This wine aroma. Dami Hayashi swallowed a mouthful of saliva, feeling somewhat incredulous. She was a drunkard, a famous drunkard in Goddess City. As a general, Dami Hayashi lived a hard life, mainly because she used all her money to buy wine. In the Spring Breeze Pavilion alone, a jar of wine cost 9,000 nether crystals, which wasn't something ordinary people could afford. Only someone as rich as Dami Hayashi would often come here to drink wine. However, today, she smelled an even more fragrant wine. The wine aroma seemed to have a magical power, constantly twining around and filling her nostrils. It tempted the wine worm in her stomach, making her want to drink more. This is your wine? Dami Hayashi was almost bewitched as she asked. This wine is called Acheron Helplessness, and I brewed it with great care, Bufang said faintly. His hand shook, and a blue and white porcelain cup appeared in his hand. He poured the wine into the cup, and his exquisite voice rang out. The wine gently knocked against the cup, producing a sound that was intoxicating. The wine aroma became even more mellow. After lingering in the cup for a while, it became even thicker. Under Dami Hayashi's envious gaze, Bufang grabbed the wine cup and brought it to his mouth. Sizzle. As the wine entered his throat, it instantly slid down his throat and poured into his stomach. A feeling like a flame was burning instantly filled Bufang's body. The taste of the other wines completely disappeared at this moment. Bufang narrowed his eyes, feeling the wine aroma swirling in his mouth. Dami Hayashi's gluttony was stirred up, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. He reached out his slender hand toward Bufang's wine jar. However, Bufang naturally knew what she was going to do. He slammed his hand down and pressed it against the green jade wine jar. He lifted his eyes and looked at Dami Hayashi. His lips twitched as he asked, "Do you want a drink?" Dami Hayashi blinked and nodded repeatedly. "Just give me a mouthful." Dami Hayashi grinned. Bufang didn't answer. Instead, he poured himself another cup. The wine was poured into the blue and white porcelain cup, and the fragrance of the wine filled the air. "It's not impossible, but you have to treat me," Bufang said. "It's just a treat. This general will take care of it. You can eat whatever you want." Dami Hayashi patted her voluptuous chest and said with great generosity. Bufang's eyes became playful. "Very well, you said it yourself." Bufang grinned. His hand shook, and another blue and white porcelain cup appeared. He flicked his finger. Instantly, a wisp of wine shot up from the jade jar, falling into the blue and white porcelain cup, swaying in the air. A moment later, Bufang flicked his finger on the cup. That cup of wine gently swayed and floated toward Dami Hayashi. Dami Hayashi's eyes lit up. She reached out her hand, carefully receiving the cup of wine. Then, she poured the wine into her mouth. Gulp, gulp. After tasting it, her whole body slightly trembled. Dami Hayashi looked at Bufang, her face full of disbelief. Bufang's wine really crushed the chef's wine. "Your wine is not good. Although the ingredients are top-notch, the brewing technique and processing method are a little out of practice. Obviously, it's not from your so-called chef's hands." Bufang said, "Impossible. Spring Breeze Pavilion can't fool me with trash." Dami Hayashi was instantly enraged. She trusted Spring Breeze Pavilion a lot. 70% newcomer's wine, 30% chef's wine. You just drink until you're drunk. How can you understand the taste? Bufang picked up the wine lid, covering it to stop the wine fragrance from spreading. Then, he waved his hand, and the jade jar disappeared. Drinking the wine in his hand, Bufang gently exhaled. Around them, many people's gazes were focused on Bufang and Dami Hayashi. When Bufang said that the wine they were drinking was not personally brewed by the chef, many people's faces changed. Buzz, the sound of a zither resounded through the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion. The beautiful and melodious singing instantly filled the air. Swish, the red satin fluttered, and many figures stood up from the edge. They jumped down and danced in the air. Her enchanting figure and beautiful dance made many people forget what Bufang had said just now, and they all cheered and applauded. Dami Hayashi also grinned, putting her palms together, clapping and giggling. Chef Jing Yuan has personally cooked the vermilion fruit wine dragon steak for the Red Dragon Army's General Chi Si. A melodious voice rang out, filling the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion. Dami Hayashi's originally giggling face suddenly froze. Then, she curled her lips and snorted. Bufang froze. Vermilion fruit wine dragon steak. Wasn't it one of the signature dishes of Spring Breeze Pavilion that he had seen on the menu before? How could a dish appear in such a solemn manner? Swish! The dancers fluttered in the air, and soon they landed on the 8th floor. Opposite them, Chi Si, who was wearing a fiery red robe, raised her cup and drank, smiling faintly as she looked forward to the next dish. As the sound of the zither became more intense, everyone's eyes shrank. They looked over and saw a beam of light bursting out from it. In the next instant, a woman wearing a white chef robe slowly flew down from the top of the building. The silver lid covered the plate, making it impossible to see the appearance of the dish inside. However, the faint fragrance in the air was like a thick stream of water flowing into people's chests. Bufang's brows slightly furrowed, looking at the woman in the chef robe. Without a doubt, that woman should be the chef that Dami Hayashi had mentioned. She was also the person in charge of the imperial feast. This time, the Spring Breeze Pavilion was not in vain. It was not bad to be able to meet this so-called chef. Swish! The chef's cultivation was obviously not weak. Her feet stepped in the air, and soon she floated on the 8th floor. General Chi's hair fluttered, and her beautiful face had a touch of coldness. Holding a wine cup, her eyes looked straight at the chef in the chef robe. Their eyes met, and there seemed to be light flowing. Great General Chi Si, the dish you ordered, vermilion fruit wine dragon steak, is here. The woman opened her mouth, and her voice was like a bird's cry in an empty valley, making people slightly dazed. The corner of Chi Si's mouth slightly rose. She turned her head and looked at the plate covered with a silver lid with some expectation. At this moment, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at the dish. This dish was also one of the dishes in the imperial feast, and many people knew about it. Although everyone knew that this dish was in the menu, very few people would order it. It was because the price of this dish was too high. A dish as high as 100,000 nether crystals. No one was rich enough to spend money to eat it. Only Chi Si, the great general of the Red Dragon Army, had this kind of wealth. Chef Jing Yuan landed in front of Chi Si's table. She placed the plate down. With a wave of her hand, the tableware that was blooming with bright silver light was carefully placed in front of Chi Si. Looking at the tableware, Bufang was slightly stunned. Bufang was very familiar with the tableware. The knife and fork were the same tableware that Bufang had used to eat the dragon liver. Chef Jing Yuan was very beautiful. The women in Goddess City seemed to be very beautiful, and it was rare to see an ugly woman. However, Chef Jing Yuan's beauty was that of a big sister next door, while Chi Si's beauty was that of a killer. The beauty of the female King Biluo was a kind of high and mighty beauty that could not be desecrated. Dami Hayashi was a kind of silly beauty. Their beauty was different. Sizzle! A burst of hot air rose. White steam rose and gushed out from the silver lid. A fragrance seemed to have turned into a substance, instantly filling the air and lingering in the audience. Every diner in the Spring Breeze Pavilion narrowed their eyes, feeling the fragrance. Qi was the first to bear the brunt, and she enjoyed the smell very much. Chef Jing Yuan's cooking is still as good as ever. Just smelling the aroma, I can't help but sink in, Qi said. Then, the corners of her mouth curled up. She grabbed the tableware. The silver lid was lifted, and beams of light burst out from the plate. Inside the plate, a colorful brilliance burst out. A piece of reddish-brown papillion steak was placed inside. The color was gorgeous, and it was watered with a reddish-brown sauce. On the side, there was also a vermilion fruit carefully carved with knife skills. Very beautiful, very fragrant, very tempting. Everyone couldn't help but drool. The sweet and sour taste of the vermilion fruit, coupled with the strong fragrance of the papillion steak, was simply unforgettable. Bufang narrowed his eyes. His heart couldn't help but be slightly shocked. He had never seen Chef Jing Yuan's cooking technique before, whether it was in the Heaven Chief realm or the Nine Revolution Nether Chef clan. There was no Chef Jing Yuan's cooking technique. It was very unique. Papillion steak. Bufang had also made papillion steak. However, Bufang was very clear that if he compared it with this vermilion fruit wine papillion steak, he would lose without a doubt. However, whether it was the choice of the vermilion fruit, the quality of the papillion steak, or the wine water, they all completely beat the papillion steak. Bufang, you smell it, right? The wine fragrance wafting out of that dish is the wine fragrance of this jar. Dami Hayashi patted the wine jar, saying, "Oh, then you can continue to drink this wine," Bufang said. Dami Hayashi's face suddenly froze. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, looking at Dami Hayashi playfully. "Also, you said you would treat me, right?" "Oh." Dami Hayashi looked at Bufang's expression, and her heart suddenly had a bad premonition. I just want to eat that dish. You treat me." Bufang raised his hand, pointing to the vermilion fruit wine papillion steak in front of Qi-Si's table on the 8th floor. Dami Hayashi's face darkened. Sure enough, this man really wanted a foot after giving her an inch. That was a dish that cost 100,000 nether crystals. If she had so many nether crystals, she would have already exchanged them for better wine to drink. Dami Hayashi opened her mouth, wanting to shamelessly refuse. However, her eyes shrank. That was because another jade jar had appeared in Bufang's hand, and he poured out wine that was emitting a rich fragrance. The fragrance of the Acheron helplessness wine wafted out. It also attracted the gaze of Chef Jing Yuan on the 8th floor. The latter's beautiful face turned and looked down, just in time to see Bufang and the Acheron helplessness wine in Bufang's hand. Chef Jing Yuan was different from ordinary women. When ordinary women saw Bufang, they would first see Bufang as a person, then look at the wine. However, Chef Jing Yuan looked at the wine first, then the person. "This wine is extraordinary," Chef Jing Yuan said with a frown. Below the table, how could Dami Hayashi resist this temptation? It would be fine if she didn't drink the Acheron helplessness, but once she did, Dami Hayashi couldn't control her emotions at all. "Give me the wine." Dami Hayashi reached out her hand and grabbed the wine glass in Bufang's hand. She climbed onto the table, and the sound of cups swaying could be heard. Bufang tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and his whole body floated up. "This is your treat. This wine is yours," Bufang said. Dami Hayashi turned over and stood firmly on the table. The next moment, she fixed her eyes on Bufang. "Isn't it just a dish? This general is on you." As soon as she finished speaking, Bufang threw the wine glass. The wine shook as Lin Damii grabbed it in her hand. It was as if she was holding a poison that she had been hoping for a long time. She poured it into her mouth, and all the pores on her body seemed to relax. "Ha ha ha! So F** King cool." After drinking the wine, Dami Hayashi's face was flushed, and she laughed excitedly. The next moment, her figure flashed, and she appeared in front of Bufang. Her fingers flickered, and her figure retreated. She floated out, over the railing, and flew up, passing through the dancers with fluttering red satin. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Holding the green jade wine jar, he also followed, his black robe fluttering in the wind. Soon, Dami Hayashi came to the 8th floor, grabbed the wine jar, and sat in front of Chi-Si. Bufang also floated over, landing in front of the table. Chi-Si's eyes slightly raised, looking at Dami Hayashi, and the corner of her mouth slightly twitched. "What's the matter?" Dami Hayashi rubbed her hot cheeks, grinned, and said, "Old Chi, let me borrow your dish to treat a guest. How about it?" Chapter 1124. Old Chi. Chi-Si, who was sitting across from Dami Hayashi, narrowed her enchanting peach blossom eyes and looked at her indifferently. Her slender fingers gently tapped on the table. "Are you jealous of my beauty? Are you saying that I'm old?" Chi-Si said. After she finished speaking, her eyes turned. There was a scarlet luster on her eyelids, making her gaze seem a bit lazy. Chi-Si saw Bufang. This was the first time she saw Bufang. When Bufang met the female King Biliuo in the palace, Chi-Si was not there. This is the man who threatened to go to God Vanishing Mountain and said that he would make an imperial feast to conquer the queen? Chi-Si said softly. Her voice had a kind of charm that belonged to a mature woman. When Chi-Si's words came out, the entire audience went into an uproar. Many people's gazes fell on Bufang, as if they were looking at someone who overestimated himself. "Chi-Si, you haven't answered my question yet." Dami Hayashi grabbed the wine jar and shook it impatiently. Chi-Si propped up her white chin with one hand and looked at Dami Hayashi. "Do you think I'm a fool? If you have the ability, buy it yourself. 100,000 nether crystals. As a great general, you should be able to afford it." Chi-Si said. Dami Hayashi rolled her eyes. "If you don't want to lend it, then don't lend it. Why are you dawdling? Do you think I don't know that you're a miser?" Then Dami Hayashi opened her eyes, and her gaze fell on Chef Jing Yuan. Jing Yuan was slightly stunned. She did not seem to understand why Dami Hayashi was looking at her. At this moment, her attention was on the green jade jar in Bufang's hand. The wine fragrance that filled the air wrapped around her nose, causing her expression to become a little serious. Acheron grass, flower of helplessness. This jar of wine, it actually uses such rare ingredients. Jing Yuan whispered. Bufang didn't expect that this woman would be able to identify the main ingredients of the wine just by smelling it. "Chef Jing Yuan, don't look at that wine first. Look at your own wine." Dami Hayashi lifted the wine jar and shook it in front of Jing Yuan, attracting Jing Yuan's attention. When Jing Yuan saw this, her gaze instantly froze. "What happened?" "Chef, this man said your wine is fake. You brewed 30% of it, and the remaining 70% was brewed by your apprentice chef," Dami Hayashi said, looking at Chef Jing Yuan as if there was a sharp sword light bursting out from her eyes. Chi-Si held her knife and fork and had already begun to elegantly cut the papillion steak. The papillion steak emitted a rich fragrance, and the soup was even more fragrant. He cut off a piece of meat. The gravy was thick, and the outer layer of the meat was dark brown. In the middle, there was a hint of pinkness. Chi-Si forked the meat with satisfaction and sent it into her mouth. Her red lips bit down, and the gravy seeped out, overflowing from the gap between her lips. Chi-Si gently gasped, stuck out her tongue, and licked the corner of her mouth. It had to be said that Chi-Si's eating posture was very tempting. However, most people didn't notice because everyone was attracted by the taste of the vermilion fruit wine papillion steak. Bufang glanced at it and felt a chill in his heart at the control of the papillion steak's heat. It was almost perfect. The perfect control of the heat allowed the fragrance of the papillion steak to be released to the maximum. Narrowing his eyes, Bufang unexpectedly looked at Chef Jing Yuan, who was a little embarrassed by Dami Hayashi's questions. She was different from the strong chef he had imagined. The chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion, who had been in charge of the imperial feast many times, seemed to be an introverted little girl. Being questioned by Dami Hayashi, her forehead was sweating. "Great General Lin, don't worry. Let me taste this wine. If it's really as you said, I will compensate you." Chef Jing Yuan finally interrupted Dami Hayashi's endless talk and solemnly said. Bufang looked at Jing Yuan's appearance and also frowned. It seemed that Chef Jing Yuan should not be clear about this matter. It was most likely that all of this was done by the owner of Spring Breeze Pavilion. The owner of Spring Breeze Pavilion was a businessman. Since he was a businessman, he naturally had the utilitarianism of a businessman. Faking was normal. Dami Hayashi also did not speak. She looked at Chef Jing Yuan, pouring a glass of wine into her mouth. Chef Jing Yuan's brows furrowed in an instant. There was no doubt that as a brewer, she only needed to taste it to know the trick. It's my negligence. Chef Jing Yuan sighed. She was not stupid. She understood the whole story in an instant. When Dami Hayashi saw Chef Jing Yuan's expression, she suddenly froze. Was it really true? The wine she was happily drinking turned out to be fake wine? She looked at Bufang, somewhat in disbelief. She did not expect Bufang to taste it with just a sip. Dami Hayashi wanted to say something, but she could not say it. Now you know you're stupid. Don't forget the treat. Bufang said, "Can I have a glass of this wine?" Chef Jing Yuan suddenly looked at Bufang and asked nervously. Facing a man in person, she was really a little nervous. Now that Bufang saw Chef Jing Yuan, he was not in a hurry. He pulled out a chair and sat down, sitting opposite Qi Si. Qi Si, who was elegantly eating her food, unexpectedly raised her eyebrows and looked at Bufang. "I made a bet with your queen. She said that as long as I can conquer her with the imperial feast, she will take me to God Vanishing Mountain. I have something important to do there, so I want to know how to get the qualification to cook the imperial feast." Bufang looked at Chef Jing Yuan and said. He took out a blue and white porcelain cup, poured a glass of wine, and flicked his finger. It floated toward Chef Jing Yuan. Chef Jing Yuan, who was wearing a neat chef robe, took a step back, her face solemn. She took the acheron of helplessness wine that Bufang handed over, held the cup with both hands, and put it into her mouth. As the wine entered her throat, her face became even more solemn. She did not immediately answer Bufang's words, but was silent for a long time, as if she was recalling the taste of the wine. After a long time, her eyes trembled violently, and she let out a breath. "Good wine. It's really good wine." Chef Jing Yuan sighed. Her eyes were a little complicated as she looked at Bufang. "If you want to get the qualification to cook for the imperial feast, it's very simple. It's a cooking competition. You just have to beat me. Because before this, Goddess City has already carried out the selection competition for the imperial feast chefs, and I won. So if you want to get the qualification, you have to beat me. Only by beating me will you be qualified. Moreover, even if you beat me, it can only be said that you have obtained the qualification to cook with me for Her Majesty. Moreover, each of your dishes must go through my inspection to prevent you from tampering with the dishes." Jing Yuan did not hide anything, revealing everything. This made Bufang slightly stunned. He thought that the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion would not be willing to tell him how to get the qualification to cook for the imperial feast because of her status. He did not think that the other party would be so honest. However, thinking of the other party's previous appearance when asked by Dami Hayashi, Bufang also understood. This was a girl without any scheming or shrewdness. While eating, Qi Si looked at the conversation between Chef Jing Yuan and Bufang with great interest. A cooking competition? Interesting. Chef Jing Yuan was the strongest chef in Goddess City. Why did this man dare to compete with Jing Yuan in cooking? Moreover, this man wanted to go to God Vanishing Mountain. That was a forbidden place in hell, and it was difficult for people to come out alive. Was this man crazy? Here's your wine glass. Chef Jing Yuan finished her wine and handed the glass back with both hands. After Bufang took it, he looked at her. A cooking competition? Yes. When can we start? Jing Yuan was stunned. Was this man really going to compete with her in cooking? However, the aftertaste of the wine in her mouth made Chef Jing Yuan stunned. Tomorrow, your wine made me believe in your cooking, so I have to prepare seriously. Chef Jing Yuan was very serious. Bufang nodded. Tomorrow then. Tomorrow, I will come to Spring Breeze Pavilion again. At that time, it will be the time for you and me to compete in cooking. Dami Hayashi was sandwiched between the two, listening to their conversation. She couldn't help but be a little confused. Finally, she waved her hand. That's settled then. Since the general is free tomorrow, I'll be the witness of your cooking competition, Dami Hayashi said excitedly. Well, this general is also free. Picking up the fork and putting a piece of dragon steak in her mouth, Chi-Si said elegantly. As soon as her voice fell, a hissing sound rang out. What competition? I don't agree. In the distance, an old woman, with her hands behind her back, slowly walked over. Bufang's gaze couldn't help but turn and fall on the person. Cooking competition? Can anyone compete with the chefs of my Spring Wind Pavilion in terms of cooking skills? What do you think I, the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion, am? The old woman said angrily, and in an instant, she appeared in front of Bufang and the others. Chef Jing Yuan suddenly felt a little awkward. Madam Jean, Chef Jing Yuan blushed, took a step back, and said, You little girl, have you learned to make decisions without authorization? The old woman glanced at Chef Jing Yuan and snorted. Yo, Madam Jean is so powerful. Chi-Si played with the knife and fork in her hand, looking at the old woman with a slightly cold gaze. The old woman looked at Chi-Si with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. General Chi-Si, the dishes are still to your taste. Jing Yuan is not sensible. Why don't you help Madam control her? After the old woman finished speaking, her eyes turned and fell on Bufang. Man? Do you think that as a man, you can compete with the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion at will? You want to get the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. Who do you think you are? The old woman opened her mouth and scolded Bufang. This old woman was the owner of Spring Breeze Pavilion. In her opinion, it was a thankless act for Jing Yuan to compete with this man. Madam, if his cooking can really beat me, the imperial feast naturally needs to be cooked by a better chef, Jing Yuan said with a frown. Beat you? Whip my ass. The qualification to cook for the imperial feast is so precious. How can it be given up so easily? The old woman glared at Chef Jing Yuan. Jing Yuan was shocked, and the latter was speechless. She took a step back, and her eyes suddenly became red. Dami Hayashi was suddenly unhappy. You old woman, did you ask someone to make the fake wine? I risked my life to earn 9,000 nether crystals just for you to fool me with this fake wine? Dami Hayashi clenched her teeth. The old woman glanced at Dami Hayashi and said, Did you drink it? It's all because of this man. Do you believe whatever this man says? Dami Hayashi suddenly became angry. I still suspect that this wine was made by this man. I suspect that General Lin colluded with this man to frame my Spring Breeze Pavilion. The old woman opened her mouth and shouted. Jing Yuan's face suddenly became anxious. This Madame Jean was really a scoundrel. Dami Hayashi was so angry that the top of her head was about to emit smoke. Chi-Si, on the other hand, threw down her knife and fork. She also lost her appetite and just coldly looked at Madame Jean with her hands crossed. Bufang looked at all this coldly. The other party did not want him to have a chef's challenge with Jing Yuan because of Jing Yuan's reputation as a chef. If he lost, the business of Spring Breeze Pavilion would definitely be greatly affected. Moreover, Jing Yuan's dishes had always been imperial feast dishes. This was a publicity stunt. If he lost the cooking competition and lost the qualification to cook for the imperial feast, then the publicity stunt would be gone. With such a high price, how could anyone buy it? Therefore, it was absolutely impossible for the old woman to agree to Jing Yuan's request for a chef's challenge. The old woman's angry eyes turned and fell on Bufang. Don't even think about the chef's challenge. Don't even think about getting the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. This is the honor that belongs to the chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion. You are an outsider. What right do you have to snatch this qualification? Get lost, or I will ask the guard to kick you out. The old woman's voice became more and more severe, and her voice became louder and louder, echoing throughout the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion. In the last sentence, she stretched out her finger and pointed at Bufang's nose, her finger trembling. The audience was silent. Chi-Si and Dami Hayashi both coldly snorted with an ugly expression. Jing Yuan was already anxious to the point of crying. Bufong looked at the old woman indifferently. Then, he slowly stood up. He put away the green jade jar. He took off the black robe on his body, revealing the red and white vermilion robe. He slowly let out a breath. Then, his mind moved. Streaks of golden light shot out. 1, 2, 3, 7 golden explosive meatballs floated around his body, emitting a dazzling golden light. A guy who takes advantage of his seniority. Who do you think you are? Asking me to get lost. Bufong raised 2 fingers and pinched an explosive pissing meatball. His gaze was extremely cold as he said, Chapter 1125. Bufong's voice was like thunder, lingering in the entire spring breeze pavilion, deafening. Everyone's eyes widened as they looked at Bufong, who had suddenly become domineering. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. This man was actually so domineering. Did he know who he was talking to? That was the owner of Spring Breeze Pavilion, the richest person in the entire Goddess City. Even the high-ranking officials of Goddess City did not dare to offend Madame Jean. However, Bufong actually opened his mouth and scolded her without giving her the slightest face. Chi-Si was stunned. Her eyes slightly narrowed as she looked at Bufong with interest. Dami Hayashi was also slightly stunned. Obviously, she did not expect that Bufong would actually say such a thing. Madame Jean was even more angered by Bufong's words, and her whole body trembled. How many years had it been? In Goddess City, how many years had it been since someone dared to speak to her like this? Ever since she cultivated one chef after another in Spring Breeze Pavilion. Ever since Spring Breeze Pavilion took over the entire Goddess City Imperial Feast cooking qualifications in Goddess City, other than the Queen and the Priestess, who was she, Madame Jean, afraid of? Which high-ranking official dared to not give her face? In front of her, a man from the outside world actually dared to point fingers at her and scold her loudly. Simply audacious to the extreme. Good. You really have a guts. You even dare to scold me, Madame Jean. Madame Jean's face became extremely ugly. Anger surged in her eyes, and a murderous intent swept through. Only you can scold people, but I'm not allowed to talk back? To take advantage of your seniority to act like this, you're really shameless. Bufong said lightly, the corners of his mouth twitching. Oomph. You still dare talk back? Shut up. Buzz, Madame Jean suddenly shouted, and a golden crutch appeared in her hand. She slammed the crutch on the ground, and a terrifying shockwave instantly spread out. In the next moment, figures burst out from every corner of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. 4 figures instantly appeared above the Spring Breeze Pavilion. A powerful aura spread out from the 4 of them. An invisible pressure shrouded the area, causing the expressions of everyone in the Spring Breeze Pavilion to change. Chef Jing Yuan's face suddenly turned pale. It seemed that Madame Jean was really angry. She even called out the 4 great divine guards of Spring Breeze Pavilion. The cultivation of these 4 great divine guards was not ordinary. Each of them was an 8-star true immortal realm expert and had mastered an ancient array. With the 4 of them working together, coupled with the power of the array, even Chi-Si and Dami Hayashi would be extremely afraid. This male chef might not be able to escape this time. Although this man had a good relationship with General Dami Hayashi, would Dami Hayashi go against the 4 great divine guards of Spring Breeze Pavilion for a man? Because it was very easy to be seriously injured. This price, General Dami Hayashi could not afford it. Sure enough, as soon as the 4 great divine guards appeared, the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion became silent. No one dared to speak, not even daring to breathe. They all stared at Madame Jean, who was holding the golden crutch. For a moment, their minds were shaken. It was as if there was a sonorous sound. The 4 great divine guards floated from every corner of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. The pressure from their bodies seemed to form a unique force field, and in an instant, it enveloped Bufong. Dami Hayashi, who was closest to Bufong, suddenly changed her expression and became very ugly. Chi-Si also became a lot more serious. Even she did not dare to underestimate the 4 great divine guards. Madame Jean leaned on the golden crutch and stared coldly at Bufong. There was a surging, killing intent in her eyes. Man, if you beg this old woman for mercy now, I can still spare your dog life. Otherwise, offending me, Madame Jean, and causing trouble in Spring Breeze Pavilion is enough for you to be consigned to eternal damnation. Although Madame Jean was old, her voice was sonorous and full of vigor. Every word was like the evening drum and morning bell, pounding on people's hearts. For a moment, her power was unparalleled. Spring Breeze Pavilion was the noblest restaurant in Goddess City, and Madame Jean was the richest person in Goddess City. Sure enough, it was not without reason. This man was dead for sure. Suddenly, Chi froze. Because she was sitting opposite Bufang, she could clearly see Bufang's face and expression. That calm and expressionless face caused her to involuntarily reveal a strange expression. 7 beef meatballs floated around Bufang's body. The golden beef meatballs exuded heat and fragrance, which was quite magical. Many people knew about the uproar caused by the explosion of the beef meatballs. Although the power was not bad, they were still not optimistic. That kind of power might be enough to deal with ordinary true Immortal Realm experts. But against 4 8-star true Immortal Realm experts combined with an ancient array, it was not enough. Of course, this was just the opinion of the crowd. What Bufang was thinking, they naturally did not know. Dami Hayashi was a little afraid. She glanced at Bufang. She did not think that things would become so big. Beg for mercy. Old thing, I'm giving you face, right? Do you really want me to blow up Spring Breeze Pavilion? Bufang said lightly. His mind moved. Suddenly, an array emerged under his feet. Xiao Bai and Xiaopi emerged from the array, appearing behind Bufang. A puppet? This is what you're relying on? Seeing Xiao Bai and Xiaopi, Madame Jean sneered. In her eyes, this man had exhausted all his tricks. This Earth Immortal puppet's aura was only at the level of 4 or 5-star true Immortal Realm. Any divine guard could crush it with one hand. It was not something that Bufang could rely on. If he really wanted to rely on someone, then General Dami Hayashi might make him a little afraid. After all, General Dami Hayashi was on Bufang's side from the beginning. Madame Jean was not easy to deal with a general. Goddess City had 5 great generals, each of whom was at the peak of true Immortal Realm. They were in charge of their respective armies. The Green Dragon Army, the Red Dragon Army, the Black Dragon Army, the Beast Army, and the Guard Army. None of the armies could be underestimated. But now, it seemed that Dami Hayashi did not intend to help Bufang. In this way, killing Bufang would be a piece of cake. A reckless man actually wanted to fight with Jing Yuan for the right to cook the imperial feast. Who did he think he was? Boom! A loud sound. The 4 divine guards landed beside Bufang. Their aura condensed, as if they had turned into waves. They connected together and rushed towards Bufang. Bufang's eyes narrowed, and he frowned. Madame Jean leaned on her golden crutch and took a step back, out of the encirclement of the 4 divine guards. Only Bufang and Dami Hayashi were left in the encirclement. Jing Yuan opened her mouth and wanted to say something. But Madame Jean turned her head and glared at her. Shut up. Don't talk. I'll teach you a lesson later. Jing Yuan suddenly became dejected and did not say anything. Madame Jean grabbed her golden crutch, raised it, and pointed it directly at Bufang. 4 divine guards. Take this man down. If he resists, I don't care if he's dead or alive. He came to my Spring Breeze Pavilion to make trouble and spoke rudely to me, Madame Jean. This is his fate. The Chinese voice was sonorous, and it went straight for Bufang. These 4 divine guards wore golden armor, had long golden hair, and skin whiter than snow. Each of them was extremely beautiful and had a moving face. The eyes of these 4 divine guards were cold and ruthless. There seemed to be no other emotions except for killing. Bufang frowned. One of the divine guards moved, and the pressure of an 8-star true Immortal Realm burst out. It directly pressed towards Bufang. Madame Jean sneered in the distance. Chi-Si's face froze. The surrounding people held their breaths as they watched. Chef Jing Yuan, on the other hand, was dejected. Boom! Suddenly, Dami Hayashi made a move. Her palm blasted out and blocked in front of the Divine Guard. Waves of air swirled, and with one move, the Divine Guard was pushed back. Great General Lin, are you going to become enemies with my Spring Breeze Pavilion for a man? If so, this old lady will definitely report this to His Majesty. I just don't know if Great General Lin can bear the responsibility. Madame Jean looked at Dami Hayashi and sneered. Dami Hayashi's body stiffened. This old lady was the richest person in Goddess City. If she really spoke nonsense in front of His Majesty, she, Dami Hayashi, might really be punished. She might even be banned from leading the Green Dragon Army. Despicable old lady. Dami Hayashi gritted her teeth, and her wheat-colored face almost turned red because of anger. She had to choose between the Green Dragon Army and a man. Dami Hayashi naturally chose the Green Dragon Army. That was her everything. So, Dami Hayashi retreated. Man, this general can't help you. Take care of yourself. If you can escape, escape quickly. Dami Hayashi glanced at Bufang, and her eyes revealed a hint of emotion. Escape? Madame Jean sneered. Break his legs first. Bufang's face was extremely calm. He nodded at Dami Hayashi. Then, he looked at the Divine Guard. In the next moment, he grabbed an explosive meatball and gently bit into it. Suddenly, a hole appeared in the meatball. Sizzle. Thick steam burst out from the meatball, and there was also a fragrance that soared to the sky. Xiaopi, Bufang said. Suddenly, a golden stream of light flashed. With an invisible roar, the golden light suddenly became bigger. Xiaopi's figure turned into a giant beast. Bufang leaped up, landing on Xiaopi's back. He flicked his finger, and bursting pissing meatball sizzled with hot steam as it spun towards the Divine Guard who had attacked. Xiaopi's golden stream of light flashed, shooting up to the sky, heading toward the roof of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Catch him. Break his legs. Madame Jean hit the ground with her golden walking stick. Boom! Boom! The 4 Divine Guards rushed up at the same time. Everyone was watching this farce. Suddenly, a Divine Guard raised his hand, slapping the meatball that was dashing toward him. His face suddenly froze. Rumble! An explosion suddenly rang out. This explosion made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. They couldn't believe it, because the power of this explosion seemed to be stronger than before. Rumble, the Divine Guard who caught the meatball with her bare hands, suddenly howled. Her beautiful face was full of pain. One of her arms was blown off, and her body was in a mess. A whistling sound. It fell from the sky and smashed into the floor, shattering the floor. Madame Jean was shocked, taking a step back. In front of her, the ground was blown into a deep pit. An explosive meatball and a Divine Guard was seriously injured. Everyone was dumbfounded. They sucked in a breath of cold air. It turned out that the power of the explosive meatball was not its full power. Bufang had actually held back. The remaining 3 Divine Guards looked at each other, seeing the fear in each other's eyes. Above the dome, Bufang stepped on the golden shrimp. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. Around him, the golden meatballs were floating. Bufang's eyes looked at Madame Jean. Then he raised his hand, bit off another meatball, and flicked it. Swish! The explosive meatball shot out. The 3 Divine Guards did not dare stop it. They had seen the power of the explosion. The first Divine Guard's arm was blown off. It was enough to show the power of the explosive meatball. Bufang had used the explosive meatball to blow up a peak, true immortal realm expert of the Nether Prison. Naturally, they knew this power. These so-called 3 Divine Guards were just 8-star true immortal realm experts. If they dared to catch the meatball with their bare hands, they would be blown into pieces. Bufang's face was cold. That Divine Guard dodged the meatball. The meatball fell. This time, Bufang did not control the power, so the meatball landed on the wall of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. With a loud boom, the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion shook. A big hole was blasted out of the wall. Broken bricks and stones kept falling down. Damn it! Block that exploding meatball for me. Don't destroy the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Use the array. Use the ancient array. Granny Jean was flustered and exasperated. Seeing the big hole in the wall of the Spring Breeze Pavilion, she shivered in pain. Boom! The divine guard with a broken arm rushed up, his pale face showing a cold expression. Divine light appeared on the bodies of the 4 divine guards, and a small array appeared between their eyebrows. Their auras suddenly soared. The power of the 4 divine guards continued to rise. Bufang's eyes narrowed. In the next instant, the remaining 5 explosive meatballs shot out. A golden stream of light whistled across the sky, smashing toward the 4 divine guards. Boom! An extremely bright light appeared in the sky. That was caused by the explosion. Waves of air blasted out, and the Spring Breeze Pavilion seemed to be shaking. The walls were covered with dense cracks. It seemed like it would collapse at any time. The light dissipated, and the smoke disappeared. Granny Jean was so angry that her whole body was going crazy. In the sky, the scene was quite miserable. Of course, it was the 4 divine guards who were in a miserable state. They had completely turned into blood men. The superimposed power of the 5 explosive meatballs was not as simple as 1 + 1 superposition. The power of the attack increased exponentially. The bodies of the 4 divine guards were broken, dripping with blood. The golden armor on their bodies was shattered, turning into fine pieces, constantly falling. His appearance caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. They were extremely terrified. Dami Hayashi was stunned, and so was Chi Si. Everyone was horrified. This man could explode a good meatball. But a faint fluctuation of the array filled the air. Bufang furrowed his brows. The 4 divine guards were indeed extraordinary, or that array was not ordinary. Even this couldn't kill them. He exhaled. Bufang's mind flickered. In the next moment, a dried pot made of iron lotus flowers appeared in his hand. The perishing pot, emitting a gloomy luster, floated in Bufang's hand. The white flame burned quietly below, twisting the void. Chapter 11:26. A fragrant aroma instantly filled the air, lingering in the air and drilling into everyone's mouth and nose. Bufang stood on the golden shrimp, hovering above the ceiling of the Spring Breeze Pavilion with a dish in his hand. It was a steaming hot dish with a lingering aroma. The aroma of the dish was extremely rich, like a blooming flower. At first glance, people couldn't help but sink into it. It seemed to have a magical power that could completely attract people. The silver iron lotus flower and the white flame were overflowing with an oily luster. The perishing pot. It had appeared once again. Bufang held the perishing pot in his hand. His face couldn't help but turn serious. The power of the perishing pot was extremely terrifying, and the fluctuations it contained made people's hearts palpitate. Although the aroma was overwhelming, it also contained a great danger. Ordinary people didn't dare to touch it. The power formed by the gourmet array and the will of the great path was enough to make people's hearts tremble. Holding the perishing pot in his hand, Bufang could also feel the mental force in his spirit sea rapidly flowing away. It was constantly being devoured by the perishing pot at a very fast speed. To maintain the balance between the gourmet array and the will of the great path in the perishing pot, the mental force consumed was enormous. In order to obtain enough power, one must pay a corresponding price. Everyone in the Spring Breeze Pavilion was shocked. They never thought that things would turn out this way. That man had actually beaten the 4 divine guards into such a sorry state. How much power did he have to inflict such serious injuries on them? Even General Dami Hayashi or General Chi Si would find it difficult to do so. After all, the array used by the 4 divine guards was an ancient array that Madame Jean had spent a lot of money to obtain. Its power was extremely terrifying, and it had been verified countless times. The power of that array had even been recognized by the Empress. However, looking at the 4 divine guards who were bleeding profusely, everyone's mouths were dry and their tongues were dry. It was too terrifying. Dami Hayashi's heart trembled. She was incomparably shocked. Chi Si's eyes also shrank. For the first time, she looked at Bufang seriously. Although Bufang did not rely on his own strength, The fact that he was able to injure the 4 divine guards with meatballs showed that his strength was not to be underestimated. That beef meatball, did he make it himself? Exploding beef balls? Jing Yuan was already in a daze. She frowned and fell in a deep thought. As a chef, the first thing she thought about was food. Was the explosive pissing meatball a delicacy? It must be. That fragrance was very fragrant. However, how could delicacies explode? This was illogical. Moreover, the dried pot in Bu Fang's hand was emitting an even thicker fragrance. However, it cast a shadow over everyone's heart. Everyone looked at the dried pot in his hand and felt their hearts tremble, as if they were being stared at by the god of death. It was as if the dried pot represented death, incomparably terrifying. Rumble. One of the walls of the Spring Breeze pavilion collapsed. Rubble fell from the tall building and smashed into the streets of Goddess City, causing the ground to collapse. Many women on the street screamed and ran in all directions. They did not expect that the walls of the Spring Breeze pavilion would collapse. Moreover, what was even more frightening was that everyone outside the Spring Breeze pavilion looked at the densely cracked and crumbling Spring Breeze pavilion building, feeling a burst of fear. What happened in the Spring Breeze pavilion? Why did the Spring Breeze pavilion seem to be destroyed? Granny Jean was so angry that she went crazy. Her face was covered in grime from being smashed by a foreign man with meatballs. This made Granny Jean feel a burst of anger. Kill him for me. Break his limbs. Madame Jean roared and slammed her golden crutch on the ground. Buzz, waves of fluctuation spread out. In the next instant, the guards of the Spring Breeze pavilion soared into the sky. Although they were not as strong as the 4 divine guards, each of them had reached the 3-star, true immortal realm. They were the guards that Madame Jean had spent a lot of money to organize. It had always been a secret organization that she did not dare to expose. Now, because of Bu Fang, she had to send them out. He doesn't have that strange meatball anymore. He has no more tricks. All of you, take him down. Madame Jean waved her golden crutch crazily and roared continuously. Yes, the guards roared. In the next instant, a clanging sound rang out. Long swords were unsheathed, and sword light filled the air. Long blades were waved, and blade light shot out in all directions. Dozens of true immortal realm guards soared into the sky like a flood, heading straight for Bu Fang. The 4 divine guards had a strong recovery ability, so they quickly recovered. At this moment, the 4 divine guards looked at Bu Fang with murderous eyes. They almost suffered a loss in the hands of a man and were almost killed by the meatball. It was simply unforgivable. Even if Madame Jean did not say it, they would not forgive Bu Fang. Rip. The void shattered. The 4 divine guards attacked at the same time. Plus, the guards were like a flood. This power was extremely terrifying. The entire Spring Breeze pavilion was silent. Everyone raised their heads, looking at the spectacular scene on the roof. For a moment, they were speechless. Dami Hayashi did not know what to say. Without the meatball, could Bu Fang still fight? However, the dish in his hand seemed to be quite extraordinary. I hope that Bu Fang still has some tricks up his sleeves. Blow up this old woman for me. Just looking at her makes me annoyed. Dami Hayashi muttered. Chi-Si's red robe fluttered, and her eyes were extremely solemn. She felt that something terrible was about to happen. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of nether energy soared into the sky. The 4 divine guards, along with many other guards, completely surrounded Bu Fang. The ceiling was densely packed with people. Outside Spring Breeze Pavilion, many people had gathered. After all, Spring Breeze Pavilion was the largest restaurant in Goddess City, so it naturally attracted a lot of people's attention. Now that something had happened, many people came to join the fun. Bu Fang exhaled, glancing around indifferently. His spirit sea was constantly churning, and his mental force seemed to be about to be sucked dry. He felt a slight tingling pain. Using this perishing pot was also a big burden for him. His current strength was still a little weak. However, he looked around at the people surrounding him, as well as the old lady Jean who was sneering at him. Bu Fang's face gradually became cold. This old woman was really not afraid of death. Since she wanted to cause trouble, let's do it. The bursting beef meatball could not frighten this old woman. So let her have a taste of the power of the perishing pot, a gourmet nuclear bomb. Bufang didn't know how powerful this perishing pot was. He only knew that when he threw this pot behind the bronze gate of the nether prison, it blew up the green hand, leaving only bones. The owner of that green hand was definitely not weak. Since the perishing pot could blow up his skin and flesh, it must be very powerful. However, Bufang didn't know exactly how strong it was. A hint of excitement appeared on Bufang's indifferent face. In that case, let this old woman see the horror of this perishing pot. Bufang grinned, his eyes shaking violently. A moment later, a dragon roar suddenly resounded in his spirit sea. The black tortoise roared, the vermilion bird cried, and the white tiger roared. The 4 artifact spirits appeared at the same time, causing Bufang's mental force to soar. Then, Bufang slowly pushed the perishing pot forward with his palm. It was as if he had completely cut off the string that stabilized the perishing pot. In an instant, a terrible fluctuation suddenly burst out. A rumbling sound rang out incessantly. A bright blue light burst out of the perishing pot and began to spin slowly. Huh! Bufang was shocked. Xiaopi! Bufang shouted. Xiaopi's compound eyes rolled. Then, carrying Bufang on his back, he turned into a golden stream of light and shot out at high speed. In an instant, he broke through the ceiling and sped toward the sky. The moment Bufang pushed out the perishing pot, Lin Damiai's expression changed dramatically. Her face twitched, and her wheat-colored skin seemed to turn deathly pale. Damn it! Dami Hayashi cursed. Then, in an instant, her figure flashed, and she appeared on the 7th floor. She called for her subordinates, and the group of people broke through the walls of Spring Breeze Pavilion, shot out, and fled. Chi-Si's face was pale. This kind of power, without hesitation. Chi-Si's figure flashed and turned into a fiery red brilliance. She grabbed the wrist of the sluggish Chef Jing Yuan and rushed out of Spring Breeze Pavilion without looking back. Everyone was dumbfounded. Even the 2 great generals were fleeing like this. Everyone understood that something terrible was about to happen, so they all fled. For a moment, Spring Breeze Pavilion was in chaos. The sound of tables and chairs collapsing and the sound of porcelain plates falling to the ground could be heard. All of them rang out incessantly. Granny Jean was furious. All of you calm down. What's the chaos? With the 4 divine guards and the guards of Spring Breeze Pavilion here, you don't have to worry. Granny Jean slammed her walking stick and shouted. The chaotic crowd below was much quieter, but some people still rushed out of the gate of Spring Breeze Pavilion and fled into the distance. A bright blue light shot out. It wasn't fast. It slowly spun out. The hearts of the 4 divine guards trembled, but their faces did not relax at all. They floated in front of the azure perishing pot and looked at each other. Their golden hair fluttered in the wind as they stretched out their hands. An array emerged, slapping toward the azure perishing pot that was constantly spinning. The guards also unleashed their auras, which surged into the bodies of the 4 divine guards. This caused the formation to become even more solid. They wanted to block the perishing pot. See, with the 4 divine guards here, that man can't overturn the sky. Granny Jean sneered. Her words made many people in Spring Breeze Pavilion calm down, and their faces showed a relaxed expression. The escape of the 2 great generals made them think that the end of the world was coming. Rumble. However, just when everyone's expression had relaxed, a voice suddenly rang out. Just when Granny Jean finished speaking, a loud noise suddenly broke out. This sound was incomparably terrifying. In an instant, it filled the entire goddess city. Waves of air burst out, turning into ripples that spread out in an instant. With a rumble, it set off a violent gale that swept through the entire goddess city. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have fallen silent. Granny Jin's face was full of horror, and the walking stick that she was holding fell to the ground. She was completely dumbfounded. The diners under the Spring Breeze Pavilion were also in a daze. They found that all the sounds in their ears had disappeared. They couldn't hear anything. The world was silent, and only that quietly blooming white lotus was left. The lotus bloomed and kept growing bigger. Its petals fluttered in the air, covering everything. Under that white lotus, the array of the 4 divine guards couldn't even hold on for a breath before it was shattered. The 4 divine guards didn't even have the chance to scream as they were swallowed by the white lotus. The guards also spurted out blood. They wanted to escape, but it was too late. They were swallowed by the white lotus silently. This scene, in everyone's eyes, it was like the end of the world. Goddess City. At this moment, the bustling Goddess City was silent. Everyone stared blankly at the Spring Breeze Pavilion. They only saw the top of the Spring Breeze Pavilion explode, and a white lotus of energy suddenly bloomed, covering the sky. It was as dazzling as the sun. Everyone was dumbfounded. Goddess City, the back hall of the palace. Dense hot air filled the air, covering the entire back hall. In the center of the back hall, there was a hollowed-out pool. In the pool, there was green hot water surging. Around the pool, there were dragon-shaped statues. The dragon-shaped statues spat out hot water from their mouths, and the hot water gathered in the pool. Pink petals rippled in the pool, spinning in circles. In a misty pool filled with water vapor, there were 2 graceful figures playing around. Their white and tender arms seemed to be emitting hot air onto the nourishment of the water. Their palms bent, scooping up water, sprinkling it on their necks. Instantly, the hot water slid down their fair skin. You blinked, half of her head submerged in the water. She looked at Empress by Luo, who was continuously sprinkling water on her body. This kind of activity made her very shy. All of a sudden, the entire pool shook. The water exploded, forming a whirlpool. That female king Biliuo's movements paused. Then, his expression abruptly changed. Damn, this kind of fluctuation. Does she want to destroy the entire Goddess City? Boom! A beam of light flashed. Empress by Luo dashed out of the pool, splashing water everywhere. Her red robe billowed, wrapping her soft, fair body. Her bare feet stepped on the void, dashing out of the palace, heading toward the distance. There, a terrifying lotus of destruction was spreading. It slowly became blurry, as though it was about to explode, turning into a mushroom cloud. Goddess City, in a corner, Hades' era, was bewildered. He lifted his head to look at the Spring Breeze Pavilion in the distance. The lotus energy explosion made his face change dramatically. So domineering, who's so arrogant to want to destroy the entire Goddess City? All of a sudden, Aerith thought for a moment. Looking at the familiar golden light shooting into the sky, he dropped his jaw. OF*CK. Could it be that young Bu Fong? Chapter 11:27. The entire Goddess City had fallen into silence. The incandescent brilliance was incomparably dazzling, blooming in the sky, dazzling and dazzling. Spring Breeze Pavilion, the tallest building in Goddess City, the most luxurious restaurant. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, the top floor suddenly exploded and the white energy lotus burst the roof. Gravel flew everywhere, and a terrible roar resounded through the world. Dami Hayashi, who had run far away with a group of subordinates, turned around and looked at the terrible scene. Her whole person was stunned, and she sucked in a breath of cold air. Her subordinates were all trembling in fear. Everyone's face was filled with fear. This was too terrifying. Was this really caused by that man? Chi-Si stepped on the void and whistled. The red dragon flapped its wings and soared into the sky, supporting its body. Chef Jing Yuan stood on the back of the red dragon, her whole person falling into a sluggish state. I didn't expect that man to have such means, Chi-Si sighed. She didn't think that she would be wrong. Although Bu Fong's cultivation was not strong, the fluctuations he caused were incomparably terrifying. First, it was the exploding beef meatball. Then, it was the dried pot that caused such terrible fluctuations. Spring Breeze Pavilion. Is it destroyed? Jing Yuan's eyes were dull as she looked at the incandescent Spring Breeze Pavilion. Her her body and mind trembling. Chi sighed, urging the red dragon to fly further away. She knew that, judging from the energy fluctuations contained in the incandescent lotus, the destruction had just begun. In that fluctuation, Chi felt despair. Facing that kind of fluctuation, she did not have the slightest courage to face it. No, maybe the entire goddess city will be destroyed. The corner of Chi-Si's mouth twitched, and she said this with a depressed chest. Rumble. After a moment of silence, there was finally a big explosion. Flames rushed to the sky, and the energy of the explosion roared, causing a gust of wind. Everyone's ears were like thunder, and their eardrums were about to explode. Everyone was in a trance. The people around the Spring Breeze Pavilion quickly came back to their senses. In the next moment, they frantically fled in all directions in fear. If they didn't escape, they would all die when the destruction spread. In order to survive, everyone began to flee. The huge lotus continued to expand. It contained an incomparably terrifying power. As the energy expanded, the Spring Breeze Pavilion began to crumble inch by inch. Madame Jin's face was filled with disbelief. Her body was trembling, and her face was filled with fear. However, what made her feel even worse was that the entire Spring Breeze Pavilion was crumbling under the destructive lotus. Spring Breeze Pavilion was her blood, sweat, and tears for so many years. But now it was destroyed. How could she bear it? I'll fight you to the death. Madame Jean waved her golden crutch and pointed it at the destructive lotus. The energy within the lotus surged, and the entire lotus dispersed. The next moment, Madame Jean, who was waving her golden crutch and shouting incessantly, was devoured. The ground beneath his feet also crumbled and turned into slag. Hualala, her red robe fluttered. A wave of energy filled the air. It was as if there was a brilliance falling from the sky. All the people who were fleeing in panic felt their minds freeze. They subconsciously raised their heads to look at the sky. There a graceful figure wrapped in a red robe, barefoot. Under the robe, one could vaguely see her straight and plump legs. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, and her red lips were extremely hot. Empress Bai Luo stepped on the void, floating over. Looking at the blooming, destructive lotus, her face was incomparably solemn. In the next moment, she raised her hand. Her figure instantly shot out as if she had teleported. Above her body, endless nether energy gushed out. The nether energy swept over, turning into a huge hand. That huge hand moved toward the destructive lotus. Slowly, the people who were running away stopped. They all looked up at the sky. The red dragon floated in the void, flapping its wings. Looking at the peerless beauty of Empress Bai Luo, who was walking barefoot in the air, a trace of fanaticism appeared on its face. Her Majesty has made a move. Her Majesty? Chef Jing Yuan also came to her senses, and her eyes flickered. Dami Hayashi ran far away with her men. When she saw the female King Biluo, she stopped. All right. Let's rest for a while. It's all right. The queen has made a move, so it's over. After saying that, Dami Hayashi looked at the slowly expanding white lotus in horror. She exhaled. That's King exciting. That man Bufong had really done something big. Above the sky, a wave of energy rushed over. Xiaopi's speed bloomed to the extreme. He rushed to the sky, but soon he reached the top. Above him was the ground. But it was enough. Bufong looked at the blooming lotus below, his face solemn. Then, a wave of exhaustion came over him. It came from his spirit sea. In order to use the perishing pot, his spirit sea's mental force was almost completely drained. Suddenly, Bufong froze. He looked into the distance. There, Empress Bai Luo, wearing a fluttering red robe, was breathtakingly beautiful. Her red lips were red as she clapped her delicate hand. The black hand of nether energy slapped the white lotus created by the perishing pot. The black nether energy spread out in an instant, then turned into wisps and wrapped around the white lotus, turning it into a black lotus. Kacha, the black nether energy solidified. Soon, the huge white lotus was frozen, and the destruction stopped. The huge black lotus blotted out the sky, making everyone suck in a breath of cold air. Fortunately, I made it in time. I can't even take a bath in peace. The female king, Biluo, hovered in front of the perishing pot. Looking at the huge lotus and the half-destroyed Spring Breeze Pavilion, she blinked her long eyelashes. Spring Breeze Pavilion? The queen froze. Then, she seemed to think of something, and her face bloomed with a beautiful smile. It happened in Spring Breeze Pavilion? It seems that man wanted to get the qualification to cook for the imperial feast, which caused it. The queen shook her head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. A moment later, she raised her hands and pressed them on the perishing pot. Rumble. With a loud noise, the Spring Breeze Pavilion shook violently and rubble rolled down. The huge black lotus was lifted by the female King Biluo. With a tap of her feet, her lady queen strode forward and floated into the air. She lifted the black lotus of destruction, which was the size of a small mountain, and flew into the distance. Shortly after, she left Goddess City. Chi-Si rode her red dragon and chased after her. Soon, she saw the female King Biluo carrying the huge perishing pot to a wasteland outside Goddess City. She took a deep breath. Suddenly, she threw the huge lotus out. A crashing sound resounded. The female King Biluo clapped her hands and let out a long breath. That fluctuation actually contained the will of the Great Path. No wonder its power was so terrifying. He's really a crazy man. Fortunately, Ai's ability is great, and I can hold on. Biluo raised her beautiful eyebrows, and her graceful figure stretched in the void, forming a shocking arc. Chi-Si rushed over. Standing on the back of the red dragon, she bowed to the female King Biluo. Chef Jingyuan also hurriedly bowed. Okay, get up. Little Chi-Si, since you were here, why didn't you stop that crazy man? You know that if that thing completely exploded, half of Goddess City would be gone. Queen Biluo said with some dissatisfaction. Chi-Si's face suddenly turned red, and she was a little embarrassed. She didn't know that Bufang would use such a terrible method. Rumble, rumble. Suddenly, the whole world seemed to shake. A gust of wind howled. Chi-Si's heart trembled. Raising her head, she looked into the distance. That was the position of the lotus of destruction that was frozen by the queen. An explosion resounded. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky, hitting the ground, causing the top of the earth to constantly tremble. It was as if heaven and earth were being destroyed. See, fortunately, I threw it far away. Otherwise, who could bear this explosion? The female King Biluo was a little helpless. Chi-Si swallowed a mouthful of saliva, her face full of horror. Okay, let's go back to the city. The energy fluctuation there hasn't dissipated so quickly. It should disappear in a few days. An attack that contains the will of the Great Path is naturally extraordinary, the queen said. Then, she flew back to Goddess City. Halfway through the flight, the female King Biluo suddenly raised her head, looking at a golden shadow in the sky. Her red lips curled up, revealing a trace of a playful smile. Chi-Si and the queen returned to Goddess City. At this moment, the entire Goddess City was in chaos. Fortunately, the guards were dispatched, suppressing the chaos. The queen swayed her graceful figure back to the front of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Looking at the half-destroyed Spring Breeze Pavilion, she couldn't help but be a little speechless. Tell me, what's going on? The female King Biluo sat on a chair, crossed her legs, and asked. Chi-Si did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly told her everything. Old Lady Jean kicked an iron plate this time. Who told her to be so arrogant? I usually don't bother with her, but it increased her arrogance. She actually secretly organized an army and trained the 4 great divine guards. The female King Biluo held her chin and said lightly. Chi-Si did not dare to speak. But it's good. That man has saved I the trouble of finding an excuse. Chi-Si, later, sent someone to take over the Spring Breeze Pavilion. From today onwards, Spring Breeze Pavilion will belong to I. Chi-Si was stunned. She did not expect the queen to make such a decision. Won't it look like I'm taking advantage of the situation? She hesitated. What are you afraid of? Old Lady Jean reaped what she sowed. She was killed by that man's lotus of destruction. Now the Spring Breeze Pavilion is ownerless. If it doesn't belong to I, then who? The queen said with a smile. Chi was speechless. Looking at the queen's appearance, it was obvious that she had been eyeing the Spring Breeze Pavilion for a long time. Sticking out her tongue, Chi did not dare to say anything. After putting down Chef Jing Yuan, she gathered the Red Dragon army to deal with the aftermath of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. In the sky, a golden brilliance quickly fell. Bufang stepped out from Xiaopi's back with a pale face. You still know to come back. For the sake of the imperial feast, you almost destroyed Goddess City. The female king, Biluo, saw Bufang and suddenly rolled her eyes. Fortunately, she arrived before the energy completely exploded. She used a secret technique to temporarily seal the explosion and move the source of the destruction away. Otherwise, half of Goddess City would have been destroyed. Bufang was silent. He did not expect the power of the perishing pot to be so terrifying. He had miscalculated. For the sake of the imperial feast, did you have to go through so much trouble? The female king Biluo complained. Her coquettish appearance made Bufang's eyebrows twitch. Was this woman sick in the head? Didn't you say that I should find the qualification to cook for the imperial feast? Chef Jing Yuan had agreed, so that old lady did not stop me. She even wanted to send people to break my legs and kill me. I just fought back, Bufang said expressionlessly. Bufang was a little weak now. He frowned, and his mood was not very good. The female king Biluo glanced at Bufang. This queen is not an unreasonable person. You and Jing Yuan can decide the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. Anyway, the imperial feast will be held in 7 days. At that time, I hope the imperial feast will not disappoint me. The female king Biluo supported her chin with her hand and said lazily. Jing Yuan nodded. Of course, Bufang had no objection. Okay, I will come to you tomorrow for a cooking competition. Bufang exhaled and said. Jing Yuan's eyes suddenly became sharp as she stared at Bufang. I know your cooking skills should be very good, but I will not easily give you the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. In the distance, a netherworld ship suddenly tore through the void and came over. On the netherworld ship, you sat on the bow, swinging her long, white legs. Bufang was a little surprised. You? The female king Biluo's eyes lit up when she saw you. Her figure flashed, and she hugged you, pressing the latter's head against her chest. Sister you, are you here to worry about me? I am so powerful, I will be fine. Bufang looked at you, who was squeezed so hard that she could not breathe, and was a little confused. You are very familiar with this woman? After a long time, Yu's head popped out, and she exhaled. She looked at Queen Bai Luo, who was blinking her eyes, and then looked at Bufang in the distance. After hesitating for a while, she frowned and looked at Bufang, saying, Bufang, are you okay? Hearing this, the female king Biluo's mind was in a mess, and her face was full of confusion. What happened to worrying about her sister? Chapter 1128. Bufang, are you all right? You looked at Bufang and asked with a cold expression. Bufang shook his head. Of course, he was fine, although throwing out a perishing pot consumed a lot of his mental force. It was still within a bearable range. Because of the 4 artifact spirits of the god of cooking set in his spirit sea, his mental force was very condensed, and the 4 artifact spirits were like 4 vortexes, constantly promoting the recovery of his mental force. Sister you, shouldn't you care about me? Why do you care about a man? You've changed. You weren't like this before. King Biluo glanced at Bufang, and then her pretty eyes fell on you. She curled her lips in dissatisfaction. She was the dignified queen of Goddess City, yet she couldn't compare to a stinky man. Bufang, I'm hungry. You stared at Bufang with her pitch-black eyes and said. Bufang ignored King Biluo's murderous glare. Bufang nodded. He didn't want you to come to Earth Prison, but since she was already here, he didn't mind. However, Bufang couldn't guarantee that Long and the others wouldn't come and take you back. But if they really wanted to take you back, as long as you didn't come back, it wouldn't hurt to throw another perishing pot at them. Bufang thought to himself, Sister Yu, are you hungry? Tell me, and I'll immediately order the chef to cook something delicious for you. You can eat whatever you want. Even the imperial feast won't be a problem. King Biluo put her arm around Yu's shoulder and said. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. This King Biluo was a fake, right? Why didn't she have the same majestic aura as when they met in the hall? Can the imperial feast suppress the curse on my body? Yu's pitch-black eyes turned and landed on the female King Biluo as she asked. King Biluo was stunned. She bit her lips and shook her head. The curse on you is not an ordinary one. How can she suppress it with a single imperial feast? If the imperial feast can suppress it, then so what if she makes you the imperial feast every day? Bufang's dishes can suppress the curse on me, you said. As soon as he said that, King Biluo's pupil shrank. Then, she looked at Bufang in bewilderment. Dishes can suppress curses? This was really refreshing for the female King Biluo. Although she didn't believe it, seeing how serious he was, King Biluo reluctantly believed it. Oh, right. You killed Madame Jean. I'm afraid there will be a lot of trouble. The High Priestess won't forgive you. As for the High Priestess, I don't care about you. King Biluo thought for a moment and said to Bufang. Bufang was stunned. Then he understood. That's right. Madame Jean could open a restaurant at the level of Spring Breeze Pavilion in Goddess City. If she didn't have someone behind her, it wouldn't make sense. Spring Breeze Pavilion had a huge profit potential. If it weren't for the support of the higher-ups of Goddess City, it would have been swallowed up by others. But this time, the High Priestess is in the wrong. That Madame Jean dared to privately organize divine guards and an army. She didn't put this queen in her eyes. The High Priestess can only grit her teeth and swallow it. You don't have to worry. Prepare for tomorrow's cooking competition. King Biluo looked at Bufang. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed. King Biluo asked Qi Si to deal with the aftermath and organize the security of Goddess City. Because of what happened just now, there's a certain degree of panic. However, these weren't big things, so King Biluo was too lazy to move. Bufang cooked a dish for you, and you ate it all with relish. Then, while Bufang was still in a daze, King Biluo pulled you away. Bufang's mouth twitched. Thinking of King Biluo's sharp warning eyes before she left, he was quite speechless. After King Biluo disappeared, Bufang paced a few steps with his hands clasped behind his back. Gently exhaling, Bufang's mind flickered, and his entire body entered the heaven and earth farmland. Right now, he didn't have a single nether crystal, so he couldn't find Nin. It was better to enter the heaven and earth farmland. He just happened to go to the heaven and earth farmland to prepare for tomorrow's cooking competition. He couldn't give up the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. If he wanted to enter the god Vanishing Mountain, only King Biluo would agree. Right after Bufang's figure disappeared, a figure wrapped in a black robe suddenly appeared. Looking at the empty ground, he puzzledly scratched his head. Where did Bufang young man go? He was here a moment ago, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye? Goddess City, sacrificial sect palace in the main hall. A graceful figure stood in front of the window with her hands hanging down. Her calm eyes looked straight into the distance, and her eyes were like an ancient well without any ripples. Outside the door, there was a commotion. A woman wearing a thick robe and a crown slowly walked in. Her hands were clasped together as she knelt on the ground. High Priestess, Spring Breeze Pavilion has been destroyed. Her Highness has ordered the Red Dragon Army's General Qi Si to take Spring Breeze Pavilion. Spring Breeze Pavilion's Grandma Jean, as well as the 4 great divine guards that we have trained, have all fallen. Our spies in Spring Breeze Pavilion have all been removed. The woman wearing a crown had an ugly expression as she said with a serious tone. She looked at the woman standing in front of the window with her hands clasped behind her back. That was a peerlessly beautiful woman. She was indifferent like a fairy, and her body was filled with an ethereal aura. However, She looked as though she could fly away at any moment. The woman's long black hair spread out, and there was no decoration on her head. Wearing a long white robe, she slowly turned around. The high priestess slightly pursed her red lips. I already know the cause of the Spring Breeze Pavilion incident. It was because of a man that my Spring Breeze Pavilion was destroyed. Her Highness may have had designs on Spring Breeze Pavilion for a long time. Perhaps this man destroying Spring Breeze Pavilion was largely part of the Queen's plan. No, with the Queen's laziness, it's impossible for her to come up with such a plan, the High Priestess pondered. Her skin was whiter than snow, and it was as white as jade, crystal clear. The woman wearing a crown knelt on the ground, not daring to breathe loudly. After a long time, the High Priestess raised her head. Her eyes were calm, and her red lips slightly twitched. Do something for me. This man destroyed the Spring Breeze Pavilion, so I naturally can't let him go. Once the Spring Breeze Pavilion is destroyed, the nether crystals that the sacrificial sect mansion receives will be greatly reduced. This is not a small price to pay. Go and bring that man back. He naturally has to pay the price for destroying my Spring Breeze Pavilion, regardless of whether this man is the Queen's man or not. Also, I'm very interested in the destructive lotus he used. If I can use the energy contained in it, the High Priestess said in a deep voice. The woman wearing a crown listened quietly. When the High Priestess no longer spoke, she bowed, said her goodbyes, and left the room. When she walked out of the room, the pressure on her body was instantly relieved. The pressure the High Priestess gave her was too great. Her eyes turned, and her face became incomparably serious. Finding a man in Goddess City couldn't be any easier for her because she was in control of one of the 5 great armies of Goddess City. With an order, the entire army began to move, searching the entire city. If the High Priestess wanted to take someone away, no one dared to stop her. However, they were about to miscalculate. Even after searching the entire city, they couldn't find any trace of that man. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. After searching for a whole night, the guards were all dumbfounded. The woman wearing a crown furrowed her brows. If she couldn't find him, how could she explain it to the High Priestess? However, after thinking about it carefully, the corners of her mouth suddenly twitched. She knew that tomorrow, Bufong would definitely appear. If he wanted to obtain the qualification to cook for the imperial feast, he had to appear and compete with Chef Jing Yuan. At that time, it would be time to capture him. Heaven and Earth farmland Bufong landed in front of the wooden house. A warm breeze blew over, bringing with it the fragrance of grass, immortal ingredients, and a sweet breeze accompanied by water vapor. The sky was clear, with clouds slowly drifting. After Bufong appeared in the Heaven and Earth farmland, Niu Han-san also appeared. Recently, this fellow had been studying how to put the will of the Great Path into ingredients. The power of the perishing pot they had created was indeed amazing. Recently, Niu Han-san was very excited. Apparently, he had gained a lot. Owner Bu, you're finally here. This old bull has good news for you. Niu Han-san said to Bufong, narrowing his pair of slits. Then, he brought Bufong into the wooden house. He took out a wooden barrel. Then, he opened the lid of the barrel. Bufong froze for a moment, because from the wooden barrel, a rich fragrance of milk wafted out. White milk flowed in it. This is the milk of the spotted cow that Owner Bu brought in. I first put the will of the Great Path into the body of the spotted cow, and the milk produced also contains the will of the Great Path. And it's even purer. Niu Han-san grinned. He seemed to be very proud of his work. Bufong was a little surprised. There was such a thing? Sure enough, the title Father of Hybridization was not just for show. Bufong took the wooden spoon and scooped a spoonful of milk. Swish! The rich aroma of milk immediately filled the air. This aroma was refreshing and seemed to be somewhat sweet. The silky milk flowed down from the wooden spoon. A hint of surprise flashed in Bufong's eyes. He took a sip of the milk. As soon as the milk entered his mouth, it spread out. The sweet milk made Bufong's eyes light up. The pure will of the great path contained in the milk surprised Bufang. The will of the great path was different from the previous ones. The pure will of the great path was very stable. Even if the gourmet array was added, it would not necessarily explode. However, the pure will of the great path added to the milk made the taste even purer. Bufang took a big gulp. His mouth was filled with the aftertaste of the milk. Looking at the milk, Bufang's eyes narrowed. Many new cooking methods appeared in his mind. There should be a lot of dairy products now. The system would also provide milk, but it would only provide ordinary milk. It would not be as delicious as this milk that contained the will of the great path. Hence, in the past, Bufang rarely thought about making dairy products. Now that he saw this milk, his mind became active, and he could not stop thinking about it. Owner Boo, when are you going to get some good spirit fruits? Our heaven and earth farmland does not lack anything but top-grade spirit fruits. For example, the vermilion fruit. Nio Hansen looked at Bufang, rubbing his hands. Bufang covered the milk and looked at Nio Hansen, thinking for a while. If he could really get the vermilion fruit, it would be good. The vermilion fruit could make wine and even vinegar. Bufang lacked a good vinegar. When he was in the Hidden Dragon Continent, he decided to make vinegar, but he did not have time. Now that he had the heaven and earth farmland, he could put it into action. It is not easy to find a spirit fruit at the level of the vermilion fruit. But don't be anxious. I will look for it later. I will bring a vermilion fruit tree back. Bufang thought for a while and said. Nio Hansen's eyes instantly lit up. Owner Boo was domineering. He had wanted Bufang to bring back a vermilion fruit tree seed and slowly cultivate it. He did not expect that Owner Boo would directly bring back a tree. Domineering. Nio Hansen had a wish in his heart, and that was to make this heaven and earth farmland into a top-grade farmland. Cultivating the heaven tree, nurturing immortal essence, and immortal fruits and immortal materials everywhere. That sense of accomplishment would definitely intoxicate Nio Hansen. Of course, the current heaven and earth farmland was still far from that level. By the way, Owner Boo, the seed you gave me still cannot sprout. Owner Boo needs to find some energy with rich vitality to irrigate and stimulate it. Otherwise, it will be difficult for the seed to germinate. Nio Hansen said. Bufang furrowed his brows. Speaking of seeds, Bufang thought about entering the God Vanishing Mountain. It seemed that he had to win the cooking competition tomorrow. He could not afford to waste time. The Heaven Chief realm was constantly declining. The more time he wasted, the deeper the Heaven Chief realm would fall. Picking up the wooden bucket of milk, Bufang said goodbye to Nio Hansen, then turned around and left the Heaven and Earth farmland. Watching Bufang leave, Nio Hansen clasped his hands, humming a tune as he walked toward the back of the wooden house. Shortly after, the angry mooing of a cow echoed in the Heaven and Earth farmland. Bufang put the wooden bucket of milk into the system dimensional bag. His figure then returned to Goddess City. However, as soon as he appeared on the streets of Goddess City, countless gazes shot over, locking on his body. Waves of cold aura brushed against his face. Bufang was bewildered, lifting his head to look. Then, he saw the sound of air being torn around him. Soldiers wearing armor swarmed around, brandishing their weapons and surrounding him. Chapter 1129. Bufang froze for a moment and looked around in confusion. He was surrounded by a group of armored guards. Huh? What are they doing? Bufang was puzzled. Why was he surrounded by so many people as soon as he appeared? Obviously, Bufang could feel that this group of people had been looking for him since the beginning. Because as soon as he appeared, this group of people appeared and surrounded him. Their target was clear. Could it be that the Empress was jealous of Yu's attitude toward him? So she sent someone to attack him? Bufang couldn't help but think, but he quickly threw the idea out of his head. This was obviously unrealistic. The female king, Biluo, didn't look like a narrow-minded person at first glance. Then who could it be? Bufang furrowed his brows. Then his heart moved. Was it the person behind the Spring Breeze Pavilion? Was it someone who supported Madame Jean? Her Majesty the Empress seemed to have warned him that someone would deal with him. Now, what was supposed to come had come. However, it seemed that the other party's power was not small. They could actually mobilize an army to capture him. Judging from the clothes of these people, they should be the so-called guards. The guards of Goddess City? Bufong's eyes narrowed. Knowing that he had a great killing tool like the perishing pot, this group of people still dared to deal with him like this? Weren't they afraid that he would take out another perishing pot? Although Bufong couldn't take out a perishing pot, this should be a deterrent. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to deal with him at all. But swoosh! The group of people who surrounded Bufong retreated one after another, revealing a passage. A figure walked out from the passageway with quick steps. It was a woman wearing a loose ceremonial robe. The woman's hair was coiled up, and she had long eyeshadow on her face. Her eyebrows were slender like willow leaves. Her scarlet lips were gently pursed. She looked beautiful, but she had an oppressive pressure that made people not dare to breathe loudly. The woman walked out of the crowd and looked at Bufong from a distance. "Man, after searching for a whole night, I finally found you," the crowned woman said. Her voice was cold. "Looking for me? The person behind the Spring Breeze Pavilion?" Bufong said lightly with his hands clasped behind his back. He frowned as he looked at the group of guards and the crowned woman with an intimidating aura. These people were much more difficult to deal with than the 4 divine guards of Spring Breeze Pavilion. The aura of the crowned woman was almost comparable to that of Sector Lord Dit. If it weren't for the perishing pot, Bufong would have a hard time dealing with them. "We mean no harm. The High Priest wants to see you. The destructive technique you used earlier was not yours. The High Priest is very interested in that technique," the crowned woman said. Her words were always so formulaic. Bufong was taken aback. He didn't expect that the other party was actually after the perishing pot in his hand. This so-called High Priest was truly gutsy, wasn't he? "Aren't you afraid that I will kill all of you with my perishing pot?" Bufong said coldly. He looked at the crowned woman, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. "Your face betrayed you. The High Priest also said that you can't borrow that kind of external force for a second time in a short period of time. Your mental force is not strong enough." The crowned woman seemed to have seen through everything and came prepared. It was as if all of Bufong's paths were blocked. "So, come with us," the crowned woman said. She put her hands together, her sleeves hanging down, and bowed to Bufong. Her attitude seemed gentle, but in fact, it was amazing. Bufong narrowed his eyes. The women of Goddess City were really strong. However, Bufong naturally couldn't just follow them like this. He still had to rush to the cooking competition. Otherwise, if he missed the opportunity to compete in cooking, he would lose the qualification to cook for the imperial feast. The atmosphere suddenly became a little stagnant. The woman bowed, but Bufong didn't move. The woman's eyes turned and fell on Bufong, and her face trembled slightly. "You refuse a toast, only to drink a forfeit," the crowned woman said. The next moment, her figure moved. In an instant, a series of afterimages flashed, and her long sleeves rolled up, grabbing towards Bufong. Bufong's eyes shrank. He could feel that the air around him was completely sucked out by this claw. This claw oppressed him mercilessly. Buzz Bufong's mind moved. Instantly, streaks of golden flowing light shot out. Bufong held an explosive meatball with 2 fingers, bit it, and flicked it. Boom! The explosive meatball turned into a golden stream of light and was thrown towards the crowned woman. It tore through the air, causing the void to tremble constantly. There was an explosion, and the fire rose to the sky. The terrifying energy ripples spread and continued to spread. The fire quickly dissipated, and then from the fire, a figure rushed out, taking small steps, still rushing towards Bufong. The surrounding guards all pulled out their weapons, and the sharp aura went straight towards Bufong. Boom! Bufong felt as though the ground around him had sunk. The explosive meatball could not pose a threat to the woman. She rolled her sleeves, the fire dissipated, and the woman's eyes became sharper. In just an instant, she appeared in front of Bufong. Bufong took a deep breath. Then, there seemed to be a vermilion bird in his eyes, and the vermilion robe on his body suddenly turned crimson, and the flaming feathers on his back burned and fluttered. The black turtle constellation Wok appeared in Bufong's hands, and Bu Fong held it with one hand. "It's useless. Your resistance is futile," the crowned woman said with an expressionless face. If Bu Fong could use the perishing pot, then the crowned woman would turn around and run away without saying a word. However, the high priestess said that Bu Fong could only use the perishing pot once, and it would be impossible for him to use it a second time in a short period of time, because that kind of attack required too much mental energy. With the cultivation of a 3-star true immortal realm, it was impossible to use it a second time. This was the crowned woman's trump card. Chi, the black turtle constellation, spun in front of Bu Fong. Bu Fong's black hair spread out, and his face was expressionless. Suddenly, the crowned woman's face suddenly changed. Her heart trembled. She frowned and looked into the distance. There, a figure wrapped in a black robe let out a cold snort. The figure burst out an afterimage and arrived in an instant. "Who is it?" the crowned woman shouted. The black-robed man appeared in front of Bu Fong with a swoosh. He raised his palm, and the sleeves of the black robe fell down, revealing his palm. The palm was bent, revealing a middle finger. "Huh? A middle finger?" The crowned woman's face froze, and then her anger surged. The surrounding guards also had sharp eyes, and they shouted loudly. The clanging sound resounded, and their weapons were unsheathed. "How dare you, rude person!" the crowned woman shouted angrily, and her pretty white face turned red. Bu Fong looked at the black-robed man in confusion. "Do you know what this is called?" The figure wrapped in the black robe spoke, and the familiar words made Bu Fong suddenly stunned. This finger is called Hades' clothes stripping finger. The familiar voice had a playful tone, and the next moment a finger was suddenly pointed out. The monstrous nether energy continued to gather, and soon a clear finger was condensed in the void. The finger was pointed at the crowned woman. The void seemed to be constantly distorted under this finger. Hades' clothes stripping finger, one stripping. The wind whistled, blowing away the black-robed man's veil, revealing a handsome and melancholy face. The face was full of vicissitudes. The crowned woman's claw and Hades' finger collided. The terrifying energy spread out. The crowned woman was directly blasted out, staggered back, and her face became pale. Tearing sound. Crowned lady's face suddenly changed, and a strong aura continued to entangle her, moving up her arm. The sleeves of her robe were torn apart by the powerful chi, revealing her white and tender arms. However, the aftermath of the force could only tear the sleeves. Unfortunately, I did not complete the stripping. The clothes stripping finger is still a little lacking. Hades' era raised his hand and covered half of his face, his eyes bursting with melancholy. Bu Fong looked at Hades' era, holding the black turtle constellation walk, and was a little confused for a moment. "Era?" Bu Fong said softly. "Oh, Bu Fong, young man, I finally found you, but it took a long time to find you." When Hades' era heard Bu Fong calling his name, he suddenly turned his head with a smile on his face and looked at Bu Fong. His enthusiasm made Bu Fong slightly surprised. "Why are you here?" Bu Fong thought for a while and asked, "Isn't this Goddess City?" "I smelled the spicy strip from afar. I missed the spicy strip, oh, I missed you, so I rushed over," Hades' era said. Suddenly, a terrifying gust of wind arose from behind Nether King Erha. Bu Fong suddenly frowned and said, "Be careful." Nether King Erha grinned, slowly turning his head. Then he stretched out a finger, pointing it out. "Ever since this king returned to hell, this king has turned over a new leaf and diligently cultivated. Finally, this king has cleared the 18 Ghost King passes that Father set up for me. 10 levels. Now this king is very awesome, just a woman. I can strip her clothes with one finger." Nether King Erha's solemn voice rang out. The next moment, he pointed his finger behind him. Suddenly, a formation appeared around the figure of the crowned lady. The Nether King's finger had actually pierced through the woman's body. "Huh?" Hades' era suddenly froze. Then, a terrible whirlwind burst out from behind him. The whirlwind completely shredded the black robe on his body. Bufong held the black turtle constellation walk in one hand and looked at Hades' Era with an expressionless face. What happened to being so powerful? The crowned woman glanced at Hades' Era coldly. Pervert, how dare you break into my goddess city? Take him down. The crowned woman said coldly and ordered the guards to attack. The sound of the clanging was endless. The next moment, the guards all rushed towards Hades' Era. The black robe was torn apart, revealing a spacious white robe. Hades' Era's white chest was exposed, and half of his face was covered with melancholy. This is what you forced I to do. It's time to show the real Hades' stripping finger. Come on, let's hurt each other. Buzz, Nether King Erha's body suddenly released a wave of ferocious nether energy. The nether energy soared into the sky, as if it had turned into a black pillar of nether energy. His figure disappeared in an instant. A terrible pressure spread out. Boom, boom. One finger pointed out. These guards suddenly let out a scream of horror, because the armor on their bodies had collapsed, leaving only their underwear fluttering in the wind. The crowned woman's eyes suddenly shrank. She took a breath of cold air. A little saint-level powerhouse. The crowned woman screamed. Suddenly, her eyes shrank. That was because the handsome figure had appeared in front of her without her noticing. He placed a finger on her forehead. A gust of wind blew. The sound of clothes tearing was endless. The next moment, there was the sharp scream of the crowned woman in the distance. Bufong put away the black turtle constellation walk and gently exhaled. Looking at the group of guards who were stripped to their underwear by Nether King Erha, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. So Era is like this, Hades. Chapter 1130. There was a tearing sound. The sound of clothes tearing suddenly resounded. The entire place was silent, and the surrounding guards who were hugging their bodies and screaming were all stunned, because they found that under the man's finger, their leader's clothes were also torn. Only her undergarments were exposed. That white skin was reflected in everyone's eyes. The crowned woman's hair suddenly fell apart, and her dark hair fluttered continuously. Hades' Era floated in the void, pointed at the woman's eyebrows, and blinked. Then Hades' Era's eyes slid down, and he grinned. Figure not bad. The crowned woman's pupils shrank, and her face suddenly turned red. Bufong couldn't help but touch his forehead. Buzz, the crowned woman gritted her teeth, and a magic array floated above her palm, and she slapped towards Hades' Era. Hades' Era's figure suddenly flew out, and after a while, he flew and landed beside Bufong. The crowned woman, who was stripped naked, almost cried. This kind of humiliation was simply unbearable. Pervert, I will kill you. Biting her red lips, the woman was so angry that her whole body was trembling. But just as she was about to make a move, there was a sudden sound in the void. Her figure suddenly stiffened, and she turned her head to look into the distance. There, a figure in a white robe slowly stepped on the air. Greetings, High Priestess. The crowned woman's long hair spread out, and she knelt on the ground. Her beautiful figure, with this action, suddenly appeared in an amazing arc. The high priest walked in the air like an immortal that had descended from the heavens. Her eyes were extremely calm. The void seemed to be completely stagnant at this moment. Hades' Era stared at the high priestess, who was stepping on the air, and took a deep breath. I did not expect the Lord of Netherworld to come to Goddess City in person. The High Priestess of Goddess City did not welcome you. I hope Lord Hades can forgive me. The High Priestess stepped on the air, and her voice resounded like an empty valley. His black hair and white robes fluttered in the wind. Wei Jin apologized to His Highness, the Nether King. She has offended the Lord of the Netherworld, so she must apologize. The high priest's gaze fell on the crowned girl who was kneeling on the ground. The woman shuddered. The Lord of the Netherworld? This scoundrel was actually the Lord of Netherworld? However, she was also a little surprised. The Lord of the Netherworld, to Goddess City, this status was extraordinary. The first man to enter Goddess City was also called the Lord of the Netherworld. All right, don't mind it. I don't care about these formalities. Hades' Era's face reddened a little. Not only did he rip off the other party's clothes, he even wanted the other party to apologize. Even he felt a little embarrassed. However, he had a sense of propriety. In Goddess City, as the Lord of the Netherworld, he could not kill as he pleased. Otherwise, with his current strength, it would be very easy for him to kill these women. But because of his dissolute father, he couldn't kill anyone in Goddess City. Since His Excellency Hades is magnanimous, then I will thank His Excellency Hades on behalf of Wei Jin, the High Priestess said coldly. She pointed her bare feet in the air. In the next moment, she waved her wide sleeves, as if covering the sky. With a roll of her sleeves, Wei Jin and her guards disappeared. Bufang couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw this move. Hades' Era's eyes also shrank. His Excellency Hades, eat and drink well. I have something to do, so I will leave first. The High Priestess glanced at Hades' Era. Then her gaze fell on Bufang. That playful gaze caused Bufang's heart to skip a beat. It was as if this woman had seen through everything about him with a single glance. This woman's strength was definitely not ordinary. The High Priestess glanced at Bufang, then turned and stepped into the air. Very quickly, she disappeared from Bufang and Hades' Era's line of sight. The women of Goddess City are all abnormal, Hades' Era said, smacking his lips. That woman is very strong, Bufang said. Of course she's strong. After all, she represents the Forbidden Land, God Vanishing Mountain. Even that stinky dragon Inglong doesn't dare to offend Goddess City. If it wasn't for Goddess City not appearing, the situation in Earth Prison would have changed a long time ago. Hades' Era said, as if it was a matter of fact. Earth Prison's 3 great Forbidden Lands. Each Forbidden Land had a representative force, and each force was incomparably strong. Moreover, within the Forbidden Land, there was a supreme existence sleeping. It was a Forbidden Land that belonged to Earth Prison. All right, I want to enter God Vanishing Mountain. Do you have any way? Bufang asked as he looked at Hades' Era. Enter God Vanishing Mountain? Why are you going to that broken place? Hades' Era furrowed his brows, looking at Bufang, a little doubtful. The Heaven Chief world is on the verge of collapse, and the Heaven Tree's seed is in a deep sleep. It needs to be awakened by the spring of life. The spring of life is in God Vanishing Mountain, so I want to go. Bufang said concisely. The Heaven Chief world is going to collapse? TSK, TSK, TSK. That exhibitionist can't hold on anymore? I already knew that the Heaven Chief world would definitely be targeted by Nether Prison. Hades' Era rubbed his chin. The spring of life is indeed in God Vanishing Mountain, but even if you go in, it will be very hard to get it. Are you sure you want to go in? Hades' Era said. Bufang looked at him, curling his lips. There's no other way. All right, I also don't have a way to enter God Vanishing Mountain. If you want to enter, you have to talk to that crazy woman in Goddess City. She has a way to let you in. Hades' Era said. Bufang rolled his eyes. If there was no way, he should have said it earlier. Got it. I'm going to participate in the cooking competition to obtain the cooking qualifications for the Imperial Feast. Then, I'll conquer the Queen and obtain the qualifications to enter God Vanishing Mountain, Bufang said. After saying that, he turned around and walked into the distance. His feet stepped on the ground, and with an explosion, his figure shot out. Bufang, young man, wants to conquer that crazy woman. Hades' Era froze. However, when he came back to his senses, Bufang had already appeared in the distance. Bufang, young man, wait for I. Give I a spicy strip to satisfy my craving. Goddess City, Dragon Playing Lake. At this moment, the Dragon Playing Lake was already surrounded by people. The crowd moved as many people curiously looked at the empty plaza beside the Dragon Playing Lake. Over there were armored soldiers who had cleared out an empty space. In that empty space, several figures were sitting there. A radiant stove was placed on that empty space. Chef Jing Yuan crossed her arms in front of her chest, wearing a neat chef robe. Her face was extremely serious as she stood at her spot. Her eyelids drooped, looking at the stove as though she was thinking. She was waiting for Bu Fong's arrival. She would definitely not give up the cooking qualifications for the imperial feast so easily. She didn't know Bu Fong's cooking level, but she was very clear that Bu Fong's cooking level wasn't weak. From the bursting beef meatballs and the perishing pot, it could be seen. Although those were two dishes with destructive energy, just from the aroma that diffused, it was definitely not ordinary. It wasn't something that ordinary chefs could cook. The surrounding people already knew what they were going to do here. Although the qualification for the imperial feast had already ended, but just yesterday, something big happened that shocked the whole city. The Spring Breeze Pavilion was blown up. It was blown up by a man. The whole story was also dug out. Goddess City was a city of women, and the speed at which gossip spread was incomparably fast. The speed at which gossip spread meant that the speed at which information spread was also fast. Hence, the news that a man from the outside world was going to compete with the chef of the Spring Breeze Pavilion for the qualification to cook for the imperial feast spread throughout the city. Everyone was looking forward to it. They had been waiting by the dragon-playing lake for a long time. However, now a long time had passed, and that man still hadn't appeared. This made the people who had been waiting for a long time a little restless. Dragon-playing lake in the square, Chi-Si was wearing a red robe, sitting on a chair. In front of her was a small table made of namu. Beside her was the carefree Dami Hayashi. In addition to Dami Hayashi, there was another person. It was a woman who wasn't very beautiful. She had a rough figure, and her aura was very strong. This person was a general of the Black Dragon Army, and her strength wasn't any weaker than Chi-Si and Dami Hayashi. The three of them were the judges of this cooking competition. This lineup had actually made the surrounding onlookers suck in a breath of cold air. It was rare for the generals of the three armies to be the judges. However, after waiting for a long time, that man still didn't appear. That man couldn't be afraid, right? I heard that men are the kind of people who like to talk big. This man definitely doesn't dare to compete with Chef Jing Yuan, so he ran away. Chef Jing Yuan is the chef of the Spring Breeze Pavilion. She has always been a chef who cooks for the imperial feast. Who knows where this man came from, but he dared to challenge Chef Jing Yuan. The onlookers chattered, each giving their own reasons. In their opinion, Bu Fong must be afraid of losing and losing face, so he didn't dare to show up. Chef Jing Yuan was unmoved. The stipulated time hadn't arrived yet. From Bu Fong's attitude, it could be seen that he really wanted to qualify for the imperial feast, so Bu Fong would never easily give up this opportunity. Bu Fong would definitely come. Jing Yuan didn't dare to relax for the slightest. Dami Hayashi sat on a chair and walked away. She supported her chin with one hand, looking bored. That man Bu Fong, could it be that he was really afraid? Yesterday, he made a solemn vow and even destroyed the Spring Breeze Pavilion. Today, he became a turtle. Men, sure enough, as recorded in the ancient books, they were all fickle. Dami Hayashi yawned. Suddenly, when she yawned to the climax, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. Dami Hayashi almost choked on her yawn. She raised her head and looked over. Over there, the crowd parted, and two figures slowly walked out from within. Those two people, what the F asked CK? When Dami Hayashi saw the two figures, she immediately cursed. Wasn't there only one man in Goddess City? What was going on with the man beside Bu Fong with his bare chest? Could it be that this guy had a sex change and sneaked into Goddess City? Chi-Si was also slightly stunned. The meticulous black dragon general narrowed his eyes. Hades Era narrowed his eyes, holding a spicy strip in his mouth. His whole body was trembling. This was the enhanced version of the spicy strip, the enhanced version of the abyssal spicy strip. The taste of the abyss was more intense, and the overall taste was improved. The taste made Hades Era unable to extricate himself. What did Bu Fong do in the Heaven Chief realm? The spicy strip had been upgraded. The crowd parted, forming a path. Then Bu Fong and Hades Era walked all the way, quickly arriving at the dragon-playing lake. Two men. That man didn't escape. It's really surprising. Does he really think that he could be compared to Chef Jing Yuan? How could Chef Jing Yuan lose to that man? When the crowd saw Bu Fong appear, they immediately began to discuss. The chattering sounds piled up, instantly resounding through the void. Jing Yuan raised her head, looking straight at Bu Fong, her eyes filled with a dignified look. "You're finally here," Jing Yuan said. "Sorry, something happened on the way, so I was delayed for a while," Bu Fong said with an expressionless face. From his face, one could not see the slightest trace of embarrassment. "It's okay. I didn't wait for long," Jing Yuan said with a tense face. Hades Era, on the other hand, held the spicy strip in his mouth, walking to the side, watching Bu Fong cook with interest. Bu Fong, that young man, was going to cook. It had been a long time since someone had seen that kind of artistic cooking. "Since you're here, let's start our cooking competition. I won't be lenient. I will never give up Her Majesty's right to cook for the imperial feast." Jing Yuan exhaled deeply, her beautiful voice echoing through the void. A moment later, her hand shook, and instantly, the sound of wooden boxes colliding resounded. In her hand, a knife rack appeared. That rack was filled with all kinds of kitchen knives. At this moment, Chef Jing Yuan's aura suddenly changed. Her aura soared into the sky. Bu Fong was a little bewildered. His eyes focused. He exhaled softly. What a strange heart of cooking path. Chapter 1131. Chef Jing Yuan's eyes were like torches, and her beautiful face was covered with a dignified expression. A knife holder appeared in her hand, and on it, there were all kinds of kitchen knives. The handles of these kitchen knives were made of spirit gold, and they seemed to be shining. The Imperial Feast qualification cooking competition begins now. Chi Si leaned lazily on the chair, looking at Chef Jing Yuan and Bu Fong. Her red lips parted slightly. Everyone in the square was excited, and they couldn't help but burst into cheers. Finally, it began. This cooking competition had caused a big commotion. For this competition, the Spring Breeze Pavilion had exploded, so everyone was looking forward to how fierce this competition would be. The rules of the competition are that the two chefs will each cook a dish. I, the Red Dragon General Chi Si, the Green Dragon General Lin Damei, and the Black Dragon General He Mu will be the judges. They will taste and evaluate the dishes and make the final decision. The winner will obtain the right to cook for Her Majesty's Imperial Feast 6 days later. Chi Si stood up and said. Her voice wasn't loud, but at this moment it resounded throughout the entire place, allowing everyone to hear it. Bu Fong nodded expressionlessly. Chef Jing Yuan held a kitchen knife in her hand, her eyes incomparably firm. Hades Era, with a spicy strip in his mouth, stood on the side, enjoying the delicious food. He was very confident in Bu Fong. How could a young man like Bu Fong not be able to handle a little girl? If one spicy strip was not enough, then he would use 2 spicy strips. In the crowd, there was already a burst of noise. The discussion continued. However, with a wave of Chi Si's hand, everyone quieted down. As a Red Dragon General, Chi Si still had prestige in Goddess City. Hundreds of miles away from the square, a spirit gold chair was placed in the air. On the spirit gold chair, there were 2 figures sitting. One was the Empress, who was wearing a big red robe and had flaming red lips. The other was Yu, who had a cold face. The 2 of them sat on the spirit gold chairs and looked at the square, as if they were looking forward to the match. Sister Yu, who do you think will win this cooking competition? Empress Bai Luo leaned on the spirit gold chair, supporting her chin with her hand. Her eyes were filled with curiosity as she asked. Yu's pitch-black eyes stared into the distance. She looked at the calm Bu Fong and said indifferently, Bu Fong, why? Chef Jing Yuan has been the head chef of the Imperial Feast for quite a few times. Her culinary skills are pretty good. I like her dishes very much. She's a nice girl. King Biluo blinked her big eyes and said to Yu, there's no particular reason. It's because he's Bu Fong. Since he debuted, he has never lost a cooking competition. Yu's rosy lips curled slightly as she said with a smile. Looking at Yu's expression, Queen Bai Luo was speechless. She rubbed her forehead and revealed a helpless expression. I can't believe I asked you such a stupid question. Little girl, you have completely become that little chef's brainless fan, Bufong said. Nethery gave Empress by Luo a sidelong glance and snorted. Sister, you don't believe me? Then let's bet. King Biluo's eyes suddenly lit up. Bet? Okay, what do we bet? You was stunned. Why were you so excited about a bet? I haven't thought of what to bet yet. How about the loser agrees to a request of the other party? Okay, this queen has never lost a bet. King Biluo's fiery red lips cracked, and she laughed heartily. You was stunned and looked at King Biluo suspiciously. In the square, as Qi Si's words fell, Bufong and Jing Yuan also began to prepare to cook. This was not a chef's challenge, and Bufong would not have a chef's challenge for no reason. However, it was not a chef's challenge, but it did not mean that Bufong would relax. This cooking competition, he must win. As for what to cook, after thinking for a night in the heaven and earth farmland, Bufong also had an idea. This time, the dish would definitely shock everyone's eyes out. The heart of cooking path that Chef Jing Yuan released was very strong, but it was very strange. It could be said that it was the heart of cooking path, but although it was condensed, it was not as clear and firm as the heart of cooking path. In Bufong's perception, this woman seemed to be a little confused. He gave Chef Jing Yuan a deep look. Bufong gently exhaled. Then he walked to his seat. His mind moved. Bufong reached out and touched his belt. A buzzing sound rang out. In the next instant, a light flashed. It was as if there was a tiger's roar resounding, causing the hearts of the audience to jump. Boom! With a loud sound, a white tiger heaven stove was smashed on the ground by Bufong. Chef Jing Yuan's eyes instantly shrank. Looking at the white tiger heaven stove, she felt a huge pressure bearing down on her. This stove, Chef Jing Yuan took a deep breath, feeling a huge pressure that she had never felt before. However, she would not admit defeat like this. Only when there was pressure would there be motivation. As the #1 chef of Spring Breeze Pavilion for so many years, Jing Yuan's heart was also a little confused and tired. Her mind moved. Suddenly, the kitchen knives on the knife rack soared into the sky. Accompanied by a buzzing sound, they tore through the air, constantly spinning in the air. 2 kitchen knives were spinning. Chef Jing Yuan reached out her hand, grabbing the handles made of spirit gold. Her eyes were like torches. In the distance, the ingredients automatically flew over. Jing Yuan, who was holding onto 2 kitchen knives, waved them fiercely. A wave of knife light flashed. Instantly, those ingredients were like flying petals, falling unceasingly. Jing Yuan's knife was so fast that it was hard for people to catch it. It's Chef Jing Yuan's 2-blade knife skill. What an incomparably cool knife skill. It's really unbelievable. It's been a long time since I saw Chef Jing Yuan show her cooking skills. That kind of cooking is like art. The surrounding crowd was chattering excitedly. They talked nonstop, and everyone's faces were filled with excitement. It was as if being able to see Jing Yuan's cooking was a supreme honor. Once Jing Yuan entered the state of cooking, she became very serious. Every swing of a knife would cut the ingredients perfectly. Moreover, the depth of the knife and the horizontal length of the knife were all precisely calculated. She had practiced these knife skills for countless years, and she had long been familiar with them. When she performed them, there was not a single mistake. Just as she understood, if she wanted to become a great chef, she had to practice day and night. She had to practice knife skills, cooking techniques, fire control, and other skills skillfully. Only then would she be able to bring out the taste of the dishes to the extreme. Her mind was immersed in cooking. Suddenly, in the distance, there was a burst of exclamation. The onlookers seemed to have seen something incredible. Chef Jing Yuan was also slightly stunned. She subconsciously raised her head and looked into the distance. There, Bufong also began to cook. However, Bufong's cooking was very simple. Swish! They saw Bufong take out a wooden barrel. The wooden barrel was opened, and suddenly, a strong milk fragrance filled the air. This milk fragrance had a mellow taste, and there was a faint, unique fluctuation. This fluctuation spread. It made Qi Si and the others, who were calm and unruffled changed their expressions. This fluctuation reminded them of the bursting meatballs and perishing pot that Bufang had previously displayed. What did this man want to do? Did he want to make another explosion? They all straightened their backs and stared at the scene seriously. Bufang snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the black turtle constellation wok appeared. He placed the black turtle constellation wok on the stove. Bufang opened his mouth, and a white flame suddenly sprang out. As soon as this flame appeared, the temperature of the whole world seemed to change. Terrifying fluctuations spread out. When Chef Jing Yuan saw this flame, her eyes suddenly shrank. This kind of hot flame, it was the first time she saw it. In her spiritual perception, this kind of flame was incomparably violet. Sizzle. Hot air rose from the black turtle constellation wok. Bufang reached out his hand, and after checking the temperature, he poured the milk into the wok. The milky white milk poured down like a straight waterfall. The silky milk made many people exclaim. Many people were intoxicated by the milky fragrance that spread in the air. Chef Jing Yuan gritted her teeth. She didn't know what Bufang was going to cook. But she knew that she needed to concentrate on cooking her own dishes. With a thought, Chef Jing Yuan put her hands together. Nether energy continued to condense, and soon, a black flame burst out from her palm. She didn't have an immortal flame, but she had the palm flame. This was also a very hot flame. In terms of temperature, although it was not as hot as Bufang's immortal flame, it was a flame condensed from the nether energy in her body, so it was easier to control. Boom! The flame drilled into the stove. Chef Jing Yuan put aside all distracting thoughts and began to cook. On the other side, Bufang's strange cooking attracted the attention of almost everyone present. In the black turtle constellation wok, a gurgling sound rang out. That was the milk that was poured into it began to boil. The milk bubbles burst, and a fragrant smell constantly rose from it. While boiling the milk, Bufang began to move on the other side. He took out an egg. This was an 8-star Beast Emperor's Spirit Beast egg, which he had obtained in the Heaven Chief realm. The quality of the egg was very high, and Bufang needed this kind of Spirit Beast egg. Originally, the best choice would have been a phoenix egg. However, a phoenix egg could only be found by chance. There was only one, and it was used by Bufang. Now, even if Bufang wanted a phoenix egg, he couldn't find it. He took out 2 blue and white porcelain bowls. This 8-star Beast Emperor's Spirit Beast egg wasn't very big. It was about the size of 3 palms. Bufang gently patted the Spirit Beast egg. Instantly, the Spirit Beast egg soared up into the sky. Under the support of Bufang's true energy, it suddenly fell. With a crack, it hit the side of the blue and white porcelain bowl, and the eggshell cracked. Opening the eggshell, Bufang carefully separated the egg yolk and the white. This process wasn't difficult for Bufang. However, many of the people present were baffled by what they saw. Was this man cooking? This strange way of cooking really made people speechless. His hand formed a small array. Inside the array, light flashed. Then, Bufang let out a soft cry. Xiaopi! A jet of golden light dashed out, flashing around Bufang's body. It seemed to have turned into a golden shuttle. Letting Xiaopi enter the egg white, Bufang took out the crystal sugar he had made in the heaven and earth farmland, asking Xiaopi to beat the egg white. After beating the egg white, he beat the egg yolk. Xiaopi had a strange energy that could enhance the taste of the ingredients. This was very important to this dish. A moment later, Bufang's eyes turned to the pot. The milk in the pot was still boiling, and it was a little sticky. He removed the layer of milk membrane and poured the slightly viscous milk into a bowl. After cooling it for a while, he was ready to start the next step. On the other side, Xiaopi, who was happily swimming in the blue and white porcelain bowl, was taken out by Bufang. The egg white and the egg yolk were almost beaten, and the juice had some bubbles. Bufang poured the cooled milk into the beaten egg whites. Then, he asked Shrimpy to continue stirring the egg whites. The milk and egg white were mixed together. After stirring for a long time, the juice became thicker. After the mixture was evenly mixed, Bufang poured the egg yolk into the mixture and allowed Shrimpy to continue stirring it. Shrimpy seemed to enjoy this feeling very much. It tossed and turned in the water, its compound eyes rolling around. On its body, there was a faint golden brilliance constantly spreading out, turning into a formless energy that continuously fused with Shrimpy. This caused the thick liquid to shine with a bright light. Bufong took Xiaopy out, putting it on his shoulder. Xiaopy's body was spotless, blinking its compound eyes. As for the juice, Bufong gently exhaled, preparing to start the critical treatment. Freezing treatment. Bufong didn't choose to use a refrigerator, although the system would provide it. However, Bufong had a bolder idea. He planned to use his cultivation base to empty the air around the juice, creating a freezing effect. Moreover, he could control the freezing temperature according to Bufong's mind to achieve the best effect. A dragon roared and a sparrow cried. Bufong's spirit sea surged, and his mental energy surged out. It seemed to turn into a big hand, covering the blue and white porcelain bowl. Ice crystals began to form around the blue and white porcelain bowl. Bufong's eyes were fixed on the juice. In the distance, the surrounding people were puzzled by Bufong's cooking. There was no rich aroma, as they had imagined, only the milk fragrance from the previously boiled milk. However, the milk fragrance could not reflect Bufong's cooking skills. Many people were a little suspicious of Bufong at this moment. Did this guy really know how to cook? On the other side, Chef Jing Yuan's cooking had come to an end. The fire soared to the sky, and the hot flames continued to erupt. The rich aroma of the dish lingered from it. Sizzle. Everyone could even hear the sound of the oil splashing. Everyone nodded. This was cooking. That man's cooking wasn't cooking at all. Could that thing be eaten? Many people snorted. Suddenly, someone's eyes narrowed, looking over in confusion. They only found that above Bufong's head, there were black clouds emerging. How could there be black clouds underground? Everyone was dumbfounded. It wasn't just them. Even Qi Si and the other generals were slightly stunned. The next moment, in the black clouds, there was a thunderous sound. It resounded throughout Goddess City. Bufong looked up at the lightning punishment, the corners of his mouth slightly twitching. Bufong's secret handmade ice cream was finally going to be completed. Chapter 1132. Rumble. As soon as the sound of thunder rang out, the entire Goddess City panicked. Goddess City was located underground, so how could there be thunder? How many years had it been since they had heard thunder? The onlookers all raised their heads, and their faces were full of fear. They thought that the end of the world had come. Chef Jing Yuan was also stunned. She raised her head and looked at the void. Looking at the dark clouds gathering in the sky above the ground, her heart couldn't help but tremble. What's going on? Chef Jing Yuan's eyes narrowed. A moment later, she looked at Bufong in the distance. Seeing Bufong's calm appearance, her face couldn't help but change. Could it be that the dish had caused the thunder? If that was the case, that dish, how extraordinary would it be? Qi Si, Dami Hayashi, and the others also narrowed their eyes. They looked at the lightning punishment in the sky, frowning. Naturally, Bufong was no stranger to lightning punishment. In the Heaven Chief realm, basically every time he cooked a dish, he would trigger a lightning punishment. This was the test and tribulation that the Heaven Chief had to endure. Just like the fragrance of plum blossoms came from the bitter cold, if a dish wanted to be sublimated, it also had to go through tempering and the baptism of lightning. Buzz, the next moment, an array flashed and appeared beside him. A moment later, Xiao Bai's figure shot up into the sky. Its mechanical eyes flashed. After summoning Whitey, Bufong did not make any further movements. His gaze once again landed on the ice cream, which had already solidified into a solid form. Ice cream. In his previous life, Bufong was no stranger to this delicacy. The real top ice cream, whether it was the materials used or the production process, was very exquisite. A true master of ice cream would have an inhuman level of control over every single detail. As for the temperature, Bufong personally used his true energy and mental force to control it. This way, the taste of the ice cream would reach the best state. In the blue and white porcelain bowl, the ice cream had successfully solidified. A gust of cold air circulated around it. The fragrance was not strong, but one could smell a slight milky aroma. Bolts of lightning continued to descend. Whitey soared into the sky to block the lightning bolts, and they were quickly devoured. This time, it was the fourth lightning tribulation, which was of a standard degree. It was not difficult for Xiao Bai to resist it. After swallowing the thunder punishment, Xiao Bai stood behind Bufang as if he was drunk. Lightning flashed in the mechanical eyes. The dark clouds in the sky slowly dispersed. The shadow that shrouded the hearts of every woman in Goddess City finally disappeared. Many people understood that the lightning punishment was truly caused by that man. Cooking a dish could actually trigger a lightning punishment. There was such a thing. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air, their eyes filled with curiosity. Originally, they all thought that Bufang's dishes were nothing special, but the appearance of thunder changed their minds. A dish that could trigger a lightning punishment was definitely not ordinary. A strong aroma seemed to spurt out from the vortex, turning into a whirlwind that soared up into the sky. Chef Jing Yuan's cooking had finally ended. As the boiling hot oil poured down, a sizzling sound could be heard. Under this pouring, the aromas seemed to be sublimated to the extreme, bursting out completely. Smelling this aroma, Bufang couldn't help but be a little surprised. This aroma was really good. It didn't seem to come from a dish that hadn't crossed the tribulation yet. To be honest, this woman's cooking level was really good. It was a dish that was stacked like a small tower, which was overflowing with colors. The ingredients were fried, stacked together, and then poured with the soup in hot oil, which made it look like it was bursting with a golden brilliance, which was quite eye-catching. It was a gorgeous dish. However, Bufang just glanced at it, then retracted his gaze. Chef Jing Yuan's cooking skills were not bad. However, in Bufang's eyes, it was just not bad. Hell's Goddess City, after all, wasn't the Heaven Chief realm. How could there be so many top Heaven Chief chefs? Chef Jing Yuan's cooking level was still a little bit away from the Heaven Chief realm. However, her foundation was very good, and she even had the embryonic form of the heart of cooking path. It wasn't easy. Without staying in the Heaven Chief realm, it was hard to understand the difficulty of condensing the heart of cooking path. The Heaven Chief realm only had a systematic way of cultivating chefs, so the chef's cooking skills were very high. Chef Jing Yuan's innate talent was actually not bad. However, because of the environment, her cooking skills could only reach this level. Bufang glanced at Jing Yuan, his face expressionless. A moment later, he reached out his hand, patting the stove. Boom! A loud explosion sounded. This caused many people to jump up in shock. Everyone's eyes gathered on Bufang. Beams of light shot out from the frozen ice cream. The beams of light had 7 colors. It was the light that Bufang had emitted after he had controlled the temperature to reach the best. Cold air lingered, accompanied by sparkling, immortal energy. It looked like a beautiful work of art. A piece of ice crystal so beautiful that it could enchant people's hearts. Bufang's hand shook. A wisp of green smoke twirled. A moment later, the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The dragon roar was ear-piercing. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. Knife light shot out. Then, streaks of blade light fell like meteors. Everybody was dumbstruck, looking at him. They held their breaths, not daring to breathe loudly. The moment Bufang used his knife skill, they were shocked to find that in front of them, there seemed to be a vast starry sky. Streaks of meteors slid down from the starry sky and fell down. In the starry sky, the stars were dazzling. One by one, 7 connected, forming a shocking picture in the sky. They didn't dare to imagine such a situation. The meteor knife skill and the Big Dipper carving skill. These were the skills that were deeply engraved in Bufang's memory. Almost subconsciously, he unleashed it. The dragon bone kitchen knife began a process and carved the ice cream. The 7-colored light was dim, and sometimes it disappeared. The people around couldn't help but exclaim. Soon, The carved ice cream slowly floated down from the white tiger stove. Bufong turned his hand. 3 blue and white porcelain bowls spun in his hand. Then he placed them on the ground. Instantly, the ice cream fell, falling into the blue and white porcelain bowls. Then, the 3 bowls of ice cream were finished. The first bowl of ice cream was like a blooming rose. The petals weren't thin, but they were thick. When they curved, they presented a beautiful curve. The second bowl of ice cream was a flying lawn bird. The wings of the lawn bird had been sculpted in an extremely lifelike manner, as if it were really going to come to life and spread its wings. For the third bowl of ice cream, Bufong carved a charmingly naive little bear. The bear squinted its eyes, sitting in the porcelain bowl. It looked simple and cute. When the 3 bowls of ice cream appeared, all the women present were dumbfounded. They didn't expect that Bufong could make such a dish. The ice cream had a 7-colored luster, and as soon as it appeared, it completely attracted their gazes, making them unable to move their eyes away. So beautiful, so cute. Can this thing be eaten? It looks so exquisite. I didn't expect that a dish could be made like this. It feels like my view of the world has been refreshed. The surrounding crowd instantly burst into an uproar. It didn't have a fragrance, but its appearance alone had captured the hearts of all the women present. Chef Jing Yuan looked at the dish Bufong had finished cooking, dumbfounded. This was a dish? A dish made of ice? It looked so cute, as if it had magic. Chef Jing Yuan couldn't help but think she suddenly lost all confidence in her dishes. Bufong used a clean white cloth to wipe away the impurities around the blue and white porcelain bowl. Then, he took out a white handkerchief and placed it under the bowl. With a shake of his hand, a small spoon made of silver was placed on top of the white handkerchief. Then, Bufong took a step back, gently exhaling. He clasped his hands together, calmly saying, "Secret handmade ice cream done." As soon as he said that, the crowd cheered. Although they didn't know what these women were cheering for in the distance, on the spirit gold throne, the female King Biluo craned her neck, which was as slender as a swan's. She squinted her eyes at the 3 bowls of ice cream that Bufong had placed on the stove, a dumbfounded look on her face. "Sister, you, what dish did this little chef make? How come I have never seen such a cute dish?" The female King Biluo asked, puzzled. He was also a little dazed. It was her first time seeing Bufong make such a dish. She had never eaten it before, so she didn't know how to answer. Can this thing be eaten? It's something that can only be seen, but not eaten. Don't even think about winning against Jing Yuan, the female King Biluo said. You glanced at the female King Biluo, then said, Bufong's dishes are always unexpected. Have you heard of spicy strips? Do you know about hot pot? And the super delicious spicy blood lobster. Have you ever eaten it? You smacked her lips, naming the dishes one by one. This stunned the female King Biluo. It all sounded so weird. Spicy strips. What was that? Hot pot. A pot made of fire? Spicy blood lobster. Not bad, gulp. Thinking about that, the female King Biluo couldn't help but swallow her saliva. All right, I'll reluctantly believe you. The female King Biluo said, Sister Biluo, you have to remember our bet. You said, don't worry, I have never lost a bet. The female King Biluo wrinkled her nose and snorted. Bufong's mind moved, causing the 3 dishes to float around him. Carrying the 3 dishes, he walked in front of Chi Si and the others. Bufong looked at them indifferently. 3 bowls of ice cream. Each of you choose one. Bufong looked at the 3 of them, his face expressionless as he said, each of the 3 bowls of ice cream had a different shape. Different shapes represented different tastes. They could even choose by themselves. Chi Si and the others looked at each other, seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. Then they all nodded their heads. Chi Si's white finger touched her red lips, looking at the 3 ice creams spinning around Bufong, and her eyes slightly lit up. I choose the rose, Chi Si said. Bufong nodded. Then, with a thought, the bowl of ice cream, which was carved with a delicate rose, floated in front of Chi Si. Then, Bufong turned his head to look at Dami Hayashi. I choose the big bear. Dami Hayashi's wheat-colored skin flashed, and she grinned. Bufong nodded, and the ice cream carved with a big bear also floated over. He Mu, the general of Heilongjiang, naturally could only eat the ice cream carved with a phoenix, although the latter was not picky. Chef Jing Yuan placed his dish in the distance, frowning at Bufang. She bit her red lips, staring at Qi Si and the others, who were preparing to taste the ice cream. In the distance, every onlooker stretched their heads and squinted their eyes. Although the appearance of the ice cream captivated them, they did not know how it would taste. If it only looked good but did not have the taste, then it would definitely not be a good food. Not only the onlookers were watching. Empress Bai Luo and Yu, as well as Hades' Era, who was holding a spicy strip in his mouth, could not help but stare. Qi Si's delicate hand grabbed the small silver spoon, and her little finger slightly tilted up. She glanced at Bufang, then pinched the silver spoon and gently scooped the rose ice cream. The silver spoon touched the ice cream and instantly sank. The soft ice cream made Qi Si's eyes slightly brighten, and the mellow fragrance of milk suddenly burst out. Lifting the silver spoon, she scooped the ice cream into her mouth. Her red lips pursed, and her little tongue licked the silver spoon. In the next moment, Qi Si's eyes suddenly froze. On the other side, Dami Hayashi also scooped up a spoonful of ice cream and put it in her mouth. He Mu was very calm, and her movements were neither fast nor slow. However, the moment they tasted the ice cream, the movements of the three of them froze. A beep sounded. The three of them almost simultaneously pulled out the silver spoon from their mouths. A misty look appeared on Qi Si's face. Dami Hayashi's cheeks were red. Holding the silver spoon, her eyes misty, she grinned. This ice cream touched this old man's maiden heart. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.